All right, good evening. We will start the August 2024 City Council meeting. If the clerk can call them.
Vice Mayor Lowing.
Here.
Councilmember Tanaka. Councilmember Koo.
Here.
Councilmember Banker.
Here.
Councilmember Burt.
Here.
Councilmember Lithcott.
Here.
Mayor Stone.
Here.
For the record, 6 int.
Great, thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I hope everybody had a full recess. So the first thing on our agenda tonight, special orders of the day, is an interview of candidates for vacancies on the Historic Resources Board. Turn it over to the clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We have our interview for the Historic Resources Board. Our first candidate is Caroline Willis. And each of these interviews, 10 minutes. Candidate will start with an opening statement, and then the council will ask questions, and then allow the candidate to have a closing statement if time allows.
All right, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Begin whenever you're ready.
Is this on? Or do I?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, first I want to start out by thanking you for adding my property on Emerson to the historic inventory. A long time coming. And I think one of the things I like to do if I continue on the board is make an easy process for getting historic properties on the inventory. Because it's been a little stagnant. And although I pushed for this property on Center across from Hofs to be added to the inventory in the past, we're always waiting for a process. So let's get a process. So thank you for my house there. I feel like my work's done. As many of you know, I was on the HRB in the 90s. And it was quite a traumatic time. And then coming back on 3 years ago, I feel like we're moving forward. Hallelujah. I feel like there's a lot more to do. Specifically, I work on incentive and work with the public and get accurate information out there. I feel like a lot of people think that there's some onus on being on our historic inventory, but personally, I think it should be a matter of pride, and I think to work on making that happen.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll return to council for questions. Councilmember Burt.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Following up on your statement on work on incentive, are there examples of incentives that you think might be able to add to our current program?
Well, the one that's sort of at the top of the list, Mills Act. I know you're familiar with it. And I know it's been kind of thing there, at staff level for a long time now. And I think ready to push forward. I think it's by far strongest incentive. And I think that, I hate to say it's a little shameful that Palo Alto doesn't have a Mills Act, that we do actually have a Mills Act property, but we don't have an active Mills Act. And I think as far as other incentives, there's really a broad range of them that we're looking at. I don't know if the board has a feeling one way or the other. I got to say financial incentives tend to be the wrong one. Recognition is great, but people aren't getting recognition these days. So I think that even though some of our most famous citizens are living properties that are on the inventory, somehow there's still a stigma attached to them, which is just baffling me. So I think that we need to kind of incentives that will identify these properties so that people are inspired to maintain them and wait maybe a day or two longer for buyer. Are people out there that value these properties, but not everybody. The same way everybody does value a new spec house that's out of particle board. On the other hand, there's people who really value the integrity and the building materials and the craftsmanship in these old houses, but it's hard to market properties to everybody. So I think we need incentives that would kind of allow these properties survive long enough. And personally, I would like to have some demolition protection in Palo Alto. I think maybe that's going to happen in the next 3 years. But at some point, I think we really need to look seriously at that, because it's kind of shocking to me that you could demolish anything. You have to wait, but you can tear it down. And I think we have history. I mean, there's something special about Palo Alto. I know you guys are all here, and I'm here, but we're here because not just the trees, which kind of give a special, unique look on the peninsula, but also because of the way our built fabric looks and feels, and we feel like a part of history. Although I can't believe saying this, I came from DC 40 years ago. I certainly was not looking at Palo Alto being historic, but having learned a lot of the stories of Palo Alto, and I was a past student and gave tours of Palo Alto, it's remarkable to play. And we might hear about Steve Jobs or, hear somebody there, but it's an assembly of like a whole slew of remarkable people that we are living on the shoulder of. So I think we owe it ourselves to preserve our environment. And I hope you will move towards that.
Councilman Vicker?
Thank you, Mayor Stem, and thank you, Karen, for your service to date and for reapplying to serve more. Since you have been on the HRB, are there it seems that any board body committee can benefit from a breadth of talents and experiences on it. Are there any that you think we would be well supplement on the HRB? Anything that's missing in terms of experience?
Well, I think a lot of the architects have left the HRB. I'm kind of that between. I'm a licensed architect in California, but I haven't practiced in California. So I do think that understanding the architecture and what you're looking at is very important on the HRB, especially when you review individual projects. And I'd say it's what you should be looking for at this point, not because that's my feet, but I think that it's really important. We have people who kind of understand guts and the process of preserving old buildings.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you applying again. So one question I have, do you have thought on how the city can better recognize and highlight our historical treasure that we have, especially in downtown? We have so many historical kind of sites that show the birthplace of Silicon Valley, and yet it's kind of hard to be able to navigate, and for tourists coming in to be able to find them, or even for residents to be able to, the ways that the HRB can be able to kind of better support that and maybe create a grander vision. Say we got the museum coming soon.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of wonderful opportunities to celebrate our historic resources.
Well, if you have seen the brochure on Professorville or our downtown that PACC has done over the past couple of decades, the original ones were done by the HRB for my time. So I'm guessing late 70s, early 80s. I think were kind of original works by the original HRB. And I think those are really important to have out in the library, kind of. And I think in association with that, we could do a what do you call that? Video tour. I mean, if you go to any other city, you plug in your phone and have a video tour. So I think I'd really like to work on it. I think my focus, if you point me or if you don't point me, one or the other, I think my focus over the next couple of years is going to be education for the community. And driving over here, I'm thinking, wait, I've written a book with all these stories, Palo Alto, they're great stories. And you have to go dive into the historic archives, which kind of scary now. So hallelujah, the museum is coming. But they're not really accessible on the internet or anywhere else. So I think that we need to work on sharing the stories and kind of getting the information out there. But I think it's unreal to expect somebody moving here from Europe or Asia understand our history and understand why perhaps the building is not the right one to rip the inside of or rip down entirely. We can't really blame them if we're not communicating. So that's my new focus.
Yeah, thank you. Sounds like a great book. You got 4 seconds left. If you'd like to provide a closing statement, you don't have to.
Well, I gotta say it's been a pleasure. I'm really happy to see preservation kind of moving forward again. The board, as you know, is going down to 5 years, and although I don't really support the reset that happened, I think it's really good. I'm pushing for 5 for quite some time because I feel like it's a more cohesive voice, and it makes, I think, a stronger word having it be smaller. So I definitely support that, and thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Our next candidate is Geddes Ulinskis.
Good afternoon. My name is Gadinskis. I'm an architect and living here in Palo Alto in Barron Park. And I talked to the council previously, but I'll revisit a bit of my history. So I trained as an architect in New York City, And after graduation, I was fortunate to be able to work on some unique projects. And one was the restoration of 7 Carnegie Grant libraries throughout the 5 boroughs of New York City. And that was truly, each one was a gem. The second project I got to work on also was the restoration of Bryant Park, right behind the new public library, which when I first walked into was the most terrifying place I'd ever been. And it really saw quite a revival. So after I moved to San Francisco, I worked primarily as an initial architect. After starting my own firm, I had the experience of actually being on the Bernal Heights Review Board, which I lived in Bernal Heights at the time when I was in San Francisco. And I worked on a number of residential restoration projects. One of them was the Henthode residence on Dolores Street, which was actually, how shall I say, it was assigned a structure of historic merit, very rare for a home. And the Heritage Foundation actually had a easement on the property. The previous owners allowed the Heritage Foundation really the right to review any modifications to the house, interior and exterior. So my work on that project is actually a negotiation that happened with Heritage Foundation and going through all the details of all the elements of the house, exterior, interior, double hung windows, those things. Really understanding the primary elements that were really important to observe, along with looking for my client who was going to live in that house and was really spending quite a bit of resources to make it a home for themselves. And found myself in that place of negotiating something that was seen as such a tremendous historic source, as well as work for my client who had sort of needs and visions of their own. That was a great experience, and I think really helped me sort of form my own approach to negotiating people's private needs with that which is, should be reserved for the public interest. And then I recently moved to Palo Alto about years ago, and of this very much as my new home. If you ask me what's the most successful parts of Palo Alto from a preservation standpoint, I mean, again, I don't know how much technically preserved downtown along the University Avenue core, but just the feel of that environment and just the way that things like signage are done thoughtfully and things like storefronts are all done very well. It's still a family feeling. It still has the place, a sense of place that's not been a corporate rollout, but rather it's been something that has evolved over and over time of living there. So the last thing I'm gonna mention is I recently took a trip back to New York, and I went to Bryant Park, and it really was spectacular. It was a space that loved and used by people. And what I call about the process was there was this sort of privatization and this cooperation between the business and entities and the city letting them take the charge and letting them sort of really about a change where the city didn't have resources to do so. So I'm curious to know whether there's any opportunities that Palo Alto could partner with some of its businesses so that in a way we're able to recognize gems that have been neglected. We're able to sort of them up and make something that's truly unique that benefits everybody. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Questions, council? Councilmember.
Well, thank you very much for applying. I'm jumping again because I'm intrigued by the story about Bryant Park. I moved here from New York City in 1982.
Mm-hmm.
And I was back a couple of years ago, and I walked through that park and was sort of surprised. I thought, why don't I remember this? This is wonderful. And so I'm quite intrigued by how that came to be. It's like there's a restaurant, there's a
Yes,
Yeah.
and how it came about was that there were a bunch of corporations in the park, like NBC and I forget what other corporations are there, that looked down on this place that was a wasteland. And so a bunch of them got together and formed the Midtown Neighborhood Commercial District, which was actually a private business improvement district. And they kind of somehow control over the park from the city. And everybody sort of joint and fused needed to be done. And now it's this cultural resource. I mean, they have Fashion Week there, all sorts of events there. It's a venue that city really, really appreciates and loves.
I'm glad to know I'm not having a failure of memory. It actually has changed. Thank you. Just quickly, some room for others, but I was intrigued by your mention about development being a healthy thing, and then saying things in your application that really to make me that you're all about balance, appreciate balance in form and function and historical context, but modern day sensibility. A fair statement, fair
Yes,
characterization?
yes, it is. Again, me being an architect, I like things to be sent into motion. I appreciate change and renewal. Yes.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you much.
Yes, I want to get your view of the decisions that were made into how you get on the historic homes list or can stay of it. I was frankly a little bit surprised how controversial it was. I'm surprised that there was disagreement, but the property values you seem to kind of as if a historic resource home would go down in value or at least never in value, which didn't really make sense to me because there are people that come here wanting a house. Is it all original or and I mean just the pipes, but everything else. So I guess it's a two question, is there a way to sort of adjudicate that controversy? And what do you think we should do with respect to, preservations, at least to the point of not allowing demolitions?
So from where I see it, my experience, it's all has to do with property value and how much somebody's going to put there. There are people who want to live in a beautiful historic home. Unfortunately, those are not types of people who have the types of businesses and the net worth that support some of these larger lots in desirable neighborhoods. I hate to say it, but the economy of it is usually somebody ascribes value to a brand new, totally custom, and so I've done projects with people who love historic homes, but they've tended to be more in mid-level neighborhoods with more reasonable pricing. Unfortunately, when you have very desirable neighborhood, larger lots, it's you draw the kind of owner whose agenda is to just scrape everything. And so I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know how we appeal that kind of owner and make preservation sexy.
Okay, I appreciate your
30 seconds if you want to up with a closing statement, but no.
Okay. Well, I've also enjoyed being part of the conversation as far as, preservation built environment. I love hearing other people's experience and other people's insight on these matters. I feel I really enjoy part of the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
Our candidate is Zachy Posner, who will be interviewed via Zoom.
Hi, can you guys?
You can.
Hi. Well, you're very on my screen, but I'll talk away so we can get moving. I'm Zachary Posner. I am the director of architecture at Stanford University. I have worked in the Stanford universe for 2 years, first as project manager, design manager, and title manager for Stanford Hospital, and for the last 12 years on the university side. I oversee planning and design of our long-term plan of the camp, as well as our off-camp plans, and oversee design of new buildings and renovation of some of our existing buildings. I interviewed for that a little while ago, so I think hopefully some of you remember some of the conversation, but I'm eager to talk about anything related to historic preservation.
All right, thank you. Return to for questions. Remember?
Thanks for applying again for this similar but the same position. Can you just share with us a little bit more about your sense of the importance of historic preservation in Palo Alto and why and how that relates to the very significant development, particularly in housing, we have on the horizon, and how we might reconcile those two objectives?
So speak a little bit about my experience with renovation or preservation or restoration. I'd say the project might be familiar with is the Over Pavilion the renovation on Quarry Road. It's a big project. I probably spent 5 years on that, working on the site plan, sure that his view shed to the building was preserved. He built a neurosciences lab to it, siting the park garage in such a way that really wouldn't be visible in the right of way and was compatible but distinct from Villian. Preserving a red grove at the center site, which is a beautiful amenity that people in the area have shared. And then finally the renovation of the building itself, which hopefully some have been in there for healthy doctor's visit. But the exterior really brought back to its historic greatness. And thanks to HRB, we actually restored the historic finial on top of it, which I think was a really important thing that the HRB guided us to. And I think we just gave that old hospital a whole new life, hopefully for 100 years. So that's a big one for me, a milestone for me. I've also worked on projects on campus, the restoration of Coke Gardens, which is a resident building that's over 100 years old, and we've modified that, brought the interiors up to speed. As it relates to everything's going on in the built environment right now, I think the architect community is really excited about preservation, restoration in a way it's been for a long time. I think a big part of dialogue is about embodied carbon. People are recognizing that the building you can build is the one that you don't build because it contributes some embodied carbon in the environment. So both on Stanford's campus, off campus, we're looking at minimizing new construction as much as possible and finding the great buildings, that have great characteristics and trying to restore them to greatness and meet modern codes, modern standards, and new functions. But it's a complex problem, and sometimes buildings just outlive their full life, right? So it's a balance. I think the nice thing about an HRB is we can have a lot of viewpoints on the board, and people are bringing different perspectives and have really nice collaborative dialogue about what different values are. It is fairly subjective in a lot of ways, but then we have the Secretary of Interior stance to look at as well. So I just think it's a really exciting part of the architectural design change right now. And I'm not an expert about all of the homes in the Alta area that might be considered historic. Really eager to learn. I moved on here from Francisco a year ago after working here for 20 years. I commute by bicycle for the first time in my life. It's wonderful. And I'm just really eager to get there and explore all of these things that are being considered and give them fresh eyes and in mind about what meets the criteria for historic preservation.
Thank you.
I think is a question. You said you applied to the ARB, but before now it's Human Resources Board. What in particular about historic resource? What in particular interests you about kind of the historical piece? And I'm curious. I know definitely need that architectural background and experience. Also curious your kind of thoughts of maybe how the HRB can be involved in things like Palo Alto History Museum and areas that would be outside of really kind of architectural expertise.
Well, I mean, the reason I'm interested in the board is honestly to get to know more about this Palo community in general and to force myself to really get educated about what is here and what is valuable to us. Hear other viewpoints about that as well. I'm very open-minded when it comes to this stuff. I don't have a really strict doctrine about meets the standard that doesn't. So that's the main reason why I'm interested in joining HRB. I don't know a lot of the history museum. I think once I got involved with the HRB, if I'm selected, I would actually try and bring myself to speed as quickly as possible. I've worked with Amy French a lot over the years. That's part of the reason applying. I think she's an outstanding staff member, and I'm glad that she's the lead on and organizing the team. And I think I can collaborate with her really well and flex to meet a lot of different roles and responsibilities if needed.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Okay, seeing
Go ahead. Sorry.
No further questions. If you'd like to wrap up a closing statement, 2.5 minutes.
No, that's fine. Probably spoke too fast. I'll give you guys 2.5 minutes back because you got a long ahead of you.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Luck.
Thanks.
Our final candidate this evening is Bree Katz.
evening. So who starts me? Okay, just a very brief biographical note. Barry Cates, 40-year plus resident of Palo Alto in the Ventura neighborhood. Professionally, 4 years at Stanford, 30 years at California College of the Arts, and 20 years at Idaho, which means I'm either 120 years old or I did all those things simultaneously. And the latter. I am proud to say that I am by a heavy margin the least qualified of the four who are applying for the position. And I enjoyed listening to the others a lot already. I say that a little bit ironically, but quite sincerely. I do not have or claim to have the detailed knowledge of window treatments and roof lines and some of the things that have been of concern to the Historic Resource Board and architect preservation. I think of myself more as a big picture person. So I am professionally a historian. And if you are interested in a somewhat different perspective on the question of historic significance, historic preservation, I think I can offer something that is different from the highly professional skills of a trained architect, somebody who has served already on the Historic Preservation Board. I'll add just one final comment by way of introduction, and I'm eager to hear what you have to say. And that is, I was wavering between applying for a position on the Historic Resources Board and that of the Architectural Preservation Group. And I listened to a number of the sessions of both of them, and I was actually, I want to say horrified, very disappointed by some of the things that I heard in the architecture review. I live in the Ventura neighborhood, and I've been following closely the North Ventura Coordinated Plan and the Fry's development. And I heard on the Architectural Review Board statements that the Fry's building in particular is of architectural significance and need to move beyond that. And I thought that that was probably a reasonable statement from an architect, but completely unreasonable one from a historical point of view. So architectural significance is different than historic significance. And I think that we really need to be doing is recognizing that Palo Alto has a couple of unique features that deserve to be preserved. One, which is obviously the natural environment. And the other is the fact that we are, for all intents and purposes, the capital of the 21st century. My opening statement by just putting that on you, and I'd be very interested in any questions you wish to ask.
Return to council. Councilmember Burt.
Thank you. One of the things that I saw in your application was that your academic expertise is both in history and theory of design. And in context to what you further on to say that we're not simply inheritors of our architectural legacy, but we are custodians of it. So can you speak a little bit more about how your understanding of design integrates with that sense of us being the custodians of our architectural history?
Sure. I think the starting point for answering a very pertinent question is to be a custodian of the past is necessarily to preserve it as it was. I think that's actually a mistaken approach. So I don't think we honor the past by attempting to keep everything as it was. We honor the past by recognizing everything that went into it and think hard about how to get alive and vital under the continuously changing circumstances of the present. So we are moving forward today at warp speed from a technological point of view and figuring out how to create appropriate balance between putting what we have done and adapt it to a world of generative AI, for instance, or a world of CRISPR biotechnology, some of the things that are finding our present and our future. That's a really tough and a really fascinating question, and the kind of thing that really does interest me.
Vice Mayor?
Yes, I'm going to ask you from what you're thinking about to well out in the future. You see what you're talking about, preservation, but not necessarily as is. Ultimately reaching city ordinances so that guidelines can be there, but there's flexibility and there's balance.
I'll be very candid and say I will have a lot of homework to do in joining a particular group. So I will need to myself up to speed on a lot of things, especially having to do with what you asked, namely ordinances, regulation, things of that nature. I'm prepared to do that. I do have another of interests which are somewhat relevant to the question, but so I will admit orthogonal to it. As I have a real interest in thinking about how I might be able to coordinate our thinking about historic preservation and historic resources with the companies that have essentially given the identity to this community and a major part of the identity. So I have, in my writings and my own research, spent a lot of time with various of the larger tech companies, going through their archives and speaking with some people that have been responsible for preserving that. And I'd be really interested in being a voice on the Historic Resources Board that connects some of the larger of our private enterprises, the tech companies specifically, and thinking about how we'd be able to coordinate a joint effort to define and preserve what is unique to the region.
Thank you. Jed.
Sorry, that was a slightly evasive answer to your question.
No, it was another statement of how you'd add value. I thought it was quite relevant.
Thank you.
Councilmember Vinker.
Yes, thank you, Professor Cates, for applying. I appreciate it. I want to follow up on the theme that Councilor Burt started and your comments about the difference between historical preservation, architect preservation, and noticed in your application, and you alluded to it earlier with respect to the Fry's building. In your application, it says, to my mind, this would entail a bronze plaque, meaning, recognize the history.
Yeah.
And what else what would be the more you might offer?
Well, that's exactly the kind of discussion I would love to engage with architectural professionals, with property owners, with stakeholders. I can't give you my specific answer. I think that the Fry's issue is basically settled, or it will be after tonight. But I will reiterate what I did in the application. I did the idea that a brass plaque or plaque, or I don't care what it's made of, is somehow the way to preserve and restore the past is a rather pathetic gesture, honestly. So I would like to be the voice on the preservation board that is adding a depth and a richness to that discussion. So specifically, I would do it with Fry. That's beyond the scope of this conversation.
And that's fine, but perhaps, Klein, I do have a specific question about that. I'm just curious, your line of thinking. Anyway, but thank you very much for applying.
Thank you very much for listening to me.
And Councilmember, you got a minute to get your now.
Thank you so much for applying, and to everybody else who have applied. A lot of times, in Palo Alto, people talk about historic preservation, but they talk the time period when we became Silicon Valley and all that. Yeah. And a lot of times a lot is lost. So I really appreciate what you wrote in your application, that you're looking at beyond to pre-Silicon Valley times, because there's a lot of achievements there. And we're forward to hearing your vision for Ventura, and the North Ventura coordinated. But also, I think have across the street of El Camino, we have Heron Park, which also is a very rich history of how it came about. So I do look forward, since time is running out, to hearing more from you about. Thank you.
I hope to have that conversation too.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thanks to you.
I believe that's.
And that concludes our interview at HRB.
Okay, wonderful. And I believe for the record, we'll be voting on a point next week. Great.
Correct.
Thank you. All right, then we will move on to item 2, with closed session. It's a conference with property negotiators concerning 4000 Middlefield Road, more commonly known as Cupboard. We are estimating closed session until 7:05, but that is merely an estimate. All right, we'll be back, and thank you. Oh, and one more thing, we have to make a motion and
Public comment.
Sorry?
Public comment.
And comment. So do we have a motion to go closed session, and then we'll public comment?
So moved.
Okay, maybe by Councilmember. Do the, go ahead.
Our first speaker is Emma J.
Okay, so I guess y'all be disappointed I won't be coming down to oral communication, even though I have a lot to say, but I got COVID. So when I come back, I'll be talking a lot about allowing and also about this attempt by you all to do Jezebel stuff. But in reference to this, I'm looking at section 54956.8, closed session prior to purchase, sale, exchange, lease of real property. Notwithstanding any other provision of this chapter, or legislative body of the local agency may, that's the op word, hold a concession, not shall. with a negotiator prior to the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property by or for local agency to grant authority to its negotiator regarding the price, terms of payment for purchase, sale, exchange, or lease. However, prior to closed session, and I don't think the legislative body shall hold an open and public session in which it identifies its negotiators, the real property or the real property which the negotiations may concern, and the person or person with whom the negotiators may negotiate. I realize that the note of the closed section let out, but it only seems to fall short of an actual open hearing where there's robust conversation. Now, let's contrast that with the mission statement of the Ralph M. Brown Act, which again, California Government Code, Section 54950. In an act chapter, the legislature finds it and declares that the public commissions, boards, and councils and other public agencies in the state exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. It is the intent of the law that their actions be taken openly and their deliberations be conducted openly. The people of this state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people, delegating authority, do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they retain control of the instruments they have created. So, which seems to be permissive, not shall hold a closed hearing, and is more of public interest than what to do with the property vis-a-vis the ownership portion, but the city now owns with the portion that the school district owns. I'd like to hear those negotiations, and I would see some kind of reasonable explanation why we shouldn't have those negotiations open for all of us to be able to hear and give input and hopefully to provide suggestions. You all might make a difference in your decision making. So, I know you're going to ignore me, but this issue is going to come up again and again.
That concludes public comment on closed session item 2, and we now take the vote to go into closed session. Stone?
Yeah.
Councilmember?
Yes.
Member Vinker?
Yes.
Councilmember Haynes?
Yes.
Councilmember?
Yes.
Councilmember Baca?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lowing?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. We're estimated to be back at 7:05. For your patience, we're back from closed session, no reportable action, and we will now move to agenda changes, additions, and deletions. City Manager.
No changes this evening.
Well, thank you. Now we'll move on to public comment. Before we begin, I understand we have 24 speakers.
Correct. 23 requests speak at this time.
Okay. And since we're over speakers, we'll 5 minutes per the group, 1 minute per individual speakers. Do wish to remind the public of some new policies council recently passed. We're no longer allow virtual speakers. Speakers have to be in person. We're also putting the total speaker time to 30 minutes. So if public comment goes on 30 minutes, we'll move the rest of the public comment to the end of the agenda. If you would like to speak, please comment card, clerk now. Before we begin though, do you want to set a few grounds so we're all aware of expectations? First and most important, the City of Palo Alto will use inclusion and tolerance. We strive to create a safe space for all to express their views. Any intimidation or harassment of anyone in the room will not be tolerated. Second, First Amendment protects individuals' right to express views in this public space. So while we are able to end reasonable times to manner restrictions, we can't prevent a speaker from expressing their views, no matter how much we may disagree with it. So a speaker is saying something you disagree with or you find troubling, you come to excuse yourself in the room until after the person has finished their comments. We won't tolerate members of the public interrupting a speaker. Everyone is guaranteed their time to speak, but your time will be limited to your 1 minute of public comment. Please withhold all your commentary, both during and after someone speaking. Ask that you don't clap, make verbal remarks, as they may make people uncomfortable in expressing their views. Finally, ask that you honor people's personal space and right to express themselves. Respect each other and respect the forum that we've created for people to be able to share their perspectives. And before we begin with our groups, there are 2 presentations, 2 slideshows that will be shown. The first one is especially the first presentation that will be shown, the slideshows, is incredibly graphic. There are pictures of dead and mutilated children. We do not want to see that. Again, amendment, we can't stop it from shown. So if you don't want to see that, you can leave the room. Again, 5 minutes per group, so it'll be about 10 minutes. Or you can turn off Zoom or the television. So I just want to give that warning to people, so you're not shocked. Okay. With that, we will begin with our first group. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first speaker is Estelle.
Members, my name is Stella Chalfin. I am the president of the Terry Homeowners Association, which is downtown 432 High Street. I'm speaking to you in behalf of the association for the homeowners who are afraid to access their search spaces in parking lot Q. Parking lot Q is unique in that it's a shared space with Abbottary. Homeowners have a right to be in the space. In 1983, the city of Palo Alto entered a contracted plan community with Abbottary Homeowners Association. Parking lot Q is an extension of our building, and although it remains a public entity, 44 homeowners were allotted a heated storage space on levels 2 through 4. They were allotted spaces on level 2 for dedicated parking, overnight parking. They also had bicycle storage lockers, which were placed on level 1. The entire one side of level 1 was bicycle storage. What remains today of all of these allotted spaces are only the storage spaces. Abbottary's electrical room, elevator maintenance room, and 2 water heating rooms are also in parking lot Q. Almost every room has been broken into over the last 40 years. We found people sleeping in storage rooms, water heater rooms, and bicycle lockers were removed because people used them for little sleeping rooms. Recently, there has been an increase in the unhoused population using parking lot Q as a living space. Evidence personal possessions such as blankets, boom boxes, e-bike being charged, food, toilet paper, that's all common. The smell of urine and feces common. This is a health hazard and can't be overlooked. In the few years I've lived in Abbottary, I only recall parking lot Q being power washed one time in 40 years. It's disgusting and dirty, and it's clear to us lot Q is not on the cleaning and maintenance schedule as other parking structures. 2 weeks ago, I spoke to Police Captain Wag regarding the reluctance of residents having access to their storage spaces. She said parking lot Q is a public space and the unhoused have a right to be there. I think the Abbottary residents, the children, the seniors, the handicapped have the right to be there as well, have the right to be there free of fear. Parking lot Q should not be known as Hotel Q. Recent homicide in another city-managed parking structure makes it clear that the lack of proper oversight in these facilities has created dangerous environments for the city residents and the unhoused population. We're asking you to pay attention to the situation, this issue, before an unfortunate incident occurs in parking lot Q. If I have another minute, I'd also like to tell you about the elevator situation. On Sundays, I park in the new parking structure next to a California Street Farmers Market. It's beautiful. It's clean. The elevator is clean. I see children coming off of that elevator. I see families coming off of that elevator. That can't happen in parking lot Q's public elevator. It's disgusting. It smells urine. I've not let a child go on that elevator. It's fair to us. You need to attend this situation. Well, I have.
Our next speaker, Talha B.
And just to remind the public, this presentation is the quick one I referred to.
Dear Council, I am outraged, disgusted by the Council's blatant unwillingness to take a stand against the genocide in Gaza. For 300 days, you have watched in silence as innocent lives are torn apart, children burned, starved, and mutilated, and tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians killed. Next slide, please. According to the leading medical journal, The Lancet, the true toll in Gaza is at least 186,000 people. Next slide. 186,000 human beings in a concentration camp that has a population of 2 million, 50% of whom are children. That means that 8 to 9% of citizens are dead. Next slide, please. It is appalling that the council, in a city that puts itself on progressive values and intellectual leadership, has failed to muster even a whisper of condemnation. Your refusal to pass a ceasefire resolution is nothing short of a disgrace. Instead of standing up for human rights, you have chosen to cave to the pressure of those who are pro-war and genocide, hiding in the feeble excuse that foreign affairs are outside of this purview and that this is a divisive topic. The only thing divisive about genocide is support of it. Next slide, please. Please play. Let me remind you that this is not a foreign affairs issue. This is a human rights crisis. The systematic slaughter of civilians, the destruction of civil infrastructure, and the blockade of Gaza are not subjects for political debate. They are atrocities. Your silence is complicity. You do have blood on your hands. How many of you have used your political standing to reach out to Representatives Eshu or Senator Butler and Padilla? We have called them, messaged them constantly past 300 days. Have you called them even once and asked them to stop this? Next slide, please. Do you know what division looks like? It looks like the pro-genocide agitators who crashed a fundraiser 2 weeks ago for the children of Gaza. While we listened to a doctor who had returned from Gaza just 2 days prior, describing the horror of amputating limbs from children, these agitators blasted club music and dance, talking the suffering of Palestinians and Israeli hostages alike. According to police, an organizer of the agitators was someone that participated in the so-called unity statement that you all touted as a big victory for humans. Next slide, please. I think slides are out of order from the one you played. I don't know if you saw that horror video. Play it again, please. That is the head of a child. Next slide, please. This was our fundraiser for the children of Gaza that took place on July 21st. And next slide, please. For the 60+ agitators on the other side of the street, who are the one doing division in our community, not those of us calling justice and peace. You will never see any members of our movement showing up as agitators to events or harassing their communities who advocate more violence against Palestinians, as horrid as there may be. That's because our movement is comprised of Jews, Muslims, Christians, Hindus, atheists, people of all beliefs, no belief, who believe in justice, peace, unity, and coexistence. The killing of a Palestinian child or an Israeli child is no different to us. We condemn them in all of their horror. Why is it so different for you? Dr. Sube from Amino Hospital, who spoke steps of City Hall, talked about a young boy named Ahmed. Ahmed is 10 years old and enjoyed soccer and gardening. He was with his friend and brother when an Israeli missile struck. His friend injured his brother and caught Ahmed both legs and most of his hand. Dr. Sube from El Camino is the operator on Ahmed Gaza, thinking he would sure die. He miraculously survived, and 2 days after our fundraiser that we held on July 21st, we welcomed him to SFO with hundreds of other people in the area so that he could receive medical care and aesthetics. Do you want Ahmed to come here so that you can see his missing legs, and then maybe you'll tell him you're sorry for his loss? Or would you ignore him completely because your pro-war constituents in Palo Alto might find his mere existence a threat to them? You claim you don't want provisions in Palo Alto, but now standing up, you're allowing those who support this genocide to dictate the narrative. East Palo Alto had the backbone to call out this genocide for what it is. They didn't shy away from taking a moral stand despite their limitings. What's your excuse? What's your excuse? Councilmember who? Councilmember Tanaka? Councilmember Lowing, Stone, Vinker, Scott Hames, or Burt, is your excuse. We, your constituents, demand that this council nullify that horrid resolution that prevents the city council from commenting on foreign affairs when suddenly those affairs become difficult for you, and immediately pass a ceasefire resolution that calls for a ceasefire and divest all Israeli business, educational institutions, and government officials that engage in and out apartheid and genocide against Palestinians. I hope those videos view the same way that those missiles haunt Palestinians every day.
Our speaker is Deborah Lehan.
As you probably heard, the ICJ ruled Israeli occupation and annexation of Palestine to be unlawful and deemed apartheid. Around the same time of this ruling, 10 IOF soldiers were detained for gang raping a Palestinian detainee at Stee Town concentration camp. The detention of these rapists led to a massive right to violent mob protest in Israel. In this picture, the kid sitting at this table, similar to yours, debating how Palestinians should be allowed to be. Imagine yourself at that table. This is the brevity of Israel that Palo Alto is mainly supporting. This is a level of dehumanizations that Palestinians have endured for decades. All this funded us, especially low-tech companies. Palo Alto previously divested from apartheid South Africa. Now we are legally obligated to divest apartheid Israel. No more delays. Discussions need to begin immediately. Thank you.
Speaker is Ditchy.
Good evening, council members. Thank you for being here and late tonight. I can see that you work very hard for the city. Thank you. I want to express my opinion about newspaper metallic box on the street. I live between Los Robles and Page Mill, and I see a lot of these newspaper boxes or no use being used as trash and see two issues as a purpose. See the safety issue. It can be a fire. It can be, and the second issue is the beautify the city. I live here. I appreciate the city, and I would like to see some action on that. And you during the closed session, I was able to work outside and see that some action. There are 7 newspaper box.
Your time
5
is up.
are used, and one is there's message there. Thank you.
Our next speaker is row S.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Alvaro Shaw, and I'm a rising sophomore at Palo Alto High School. I also want to thank Councilmember Brinker for showing up to heat mapping campaign last night. Thank you. I'm here today to talk to you all about the airport expand plans that have been brought up. We have the community survey for it, and I just wanted to express that, I'm someone who biked here today, and I've been biking through the Baylands for all my life. I was there yesterday, and I was there, the couple before, and I've seen, wildlife and the birds, and it's always held a strong connection to me. I've always felt that, we can't, away and try to support just one-way expansion that only benefits a low class of airplanes such as Pilatus PC-12, and instead, expand in these precious life sanctuaries that so much of it.
Your time is up.
I've started a petition, gathered almost 900 signatures within 2 weeks. One day that'll be presented, and I
time is
all
up.
strong support the Baylands.
Our next speaker is Diane.
Good evening, council members. My name is Diane McCoy, and I've been a resident of Palo Alto for 48 years. I have come to share my great concerns about Palo Alto airport expansion plans, except for alternative number 1. All the plans that Bayland preserved to some degree, including 3 alternatives that do so significantly, this is a place that has 100,000 visitors a year who come to enjoy nature, a place of exploring and learning for over 1,000 students every year to learn about the plants, the animals, their health as a gauge to Earth's health, and a place, a natural barrier against sea level rise flooding, a place that thousands of birds migrate to use their winter resting place, joining the many hundreds of birds that live there year-round. This place is too valuable, too important to destroy for the sake of accommodating a bigger, noisier, more polluting class of
Your time
plane.
is up. Finish your.
All of serve only very few, all for profit few. Thank you.
One next, unfortunately, your time is up.
It was
Sorry,
voted.
time, but you can email the council your final thoughts.
Our next speaker is Emma.
Hello, so I'm out here to talk about something cool. While we were away, we've been gone a while. You've been gone for a while. But June, we actually had a joint Juneteenth and Eid picnic, and I would like to send a huge thank you to Councilmember Julie and Councilmember Vicky supporting this and for being so enthusiastic about it, and all for Pastor Colomas, who I think is here as well. Julie, when I first asked you about this picnic, you hesitate. You just said yes. And then we asked Vicky, and when you asked Pat Smith about it, they didn't hesitate either. They just said, yes. This was about Eid, which is a Muslim holiday, and Juneteenth, coming together for the first time in 30 years this same week. And it was really exciting, and there was a intersectionality. Our two communities are tiny, but together we're stronger. Councilmember and Julie, you're a great role model that we want our future
Your time is
collaborators to be.
up.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, Bob M.
4 months ago, our water converted from gas to electric, and we submitted all the required documents. Staff came out and verified the job was done properly. Our contractor submitted all the paperwork required at City Hall, and nothing happened. Emailed everything and the city's website, and nothing happened. So last week, I took all documents down to City Hall, and I got in the elevator to go up to the utility department, and the elevator is locked. It made sense 4 years ago when we had a problem with COVID. It makes no sense now. So I took the papers off at the lobby here with the utility staffer, and supposedly we had taken care of. But I want to remind all of you, City Hall belongs to the community, not the city manager.
Your time is up. Our speaker is Natalie N.
Good evening. My name is Natalie Neufeld, and I am a graduate at Stanford University studying political communication. I am in the middle of a project right now on local politics that involves the Palo Alto City Council. I am conducting ethnographic research at these city council meetings, which I cleared with clerk's office in an email exchange in February and Stanford's Institution Review Board in April. Since then, I have been observing regular city council meetings virtually and taking notes. I continue observing meetings until November in person and virtually. If anyone has questions or concerns about my project, I'm happy to hand out my business cards and follow up about it. As part of my research, I like to interview people, come to these meetings about their experiences. So if anyone in attendance here is willing to give me about an hour of their time, not right now, other time, give me your contact information or come pick up a business card for me. I'll be back for the duration of the meeting. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Greg H.
Evening and welcome back, Greg Hood. Now, I want to touch on the rail crossing debacle, and I'm just going to be very brief. Shorthand is it's not meeting any of the climate change initiatives right out of the box. AECOM's estimate is that it's going to cost $0.3 billion by 2031, and add to that, you look at the Department of General Services state, last 10 years escalation 61%. So you can multiply a number by 1.1. So in conclude, because I have 20 seconds, thank you. So I suggest money be spent on 3 things: mental health education, supporting commerce by improving the downtowns, University in California, making them active and inviting, and thirdly, increasing housing by increasing high density housing and sustainable public transit with the support of bike paths away from high dense traffic. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Shawnee K.
Good evening, Mayor Stone, council members, welcome back. My name is Shanique House. I speak for Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society and as a resident. Most of the species in our lands are suffering population declines. Some of them are endangered, and you're all familiar with some of the endangered species. You heard about them, old Marvis mouse, ridgeway rail. That's 2, but now we're having 2 more join that list, double in just a time. The boreals are probably going to get listed as candidates for endangered species October. It's likely to be the recommendation to list them. The other species, the Crutch's bumblebee, is a beautiful large bee. It is orange and black and yellow, absolutely lovely. And that's another species that has been found in the bands. Only other areas that have been found are a few in San Jose, different places in
Your
San
time's
Jose,
up.
and one in Tinville that I found. And if you want to see it here, it's absolutely gorgeous and worth protecting. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Deshelle L.
Hello, my name is Daphne Leeds. I'm the conservation coordinator for the Sierra Club Prieta chapter. I'm here tonight to ask you questions about the Palo Alto long-range facilities and sustainability plan update for the airport. Hope you as council will intend to make these questions or this knowledge public as part of this process. So number one, why is this update happening at all? Is this update a requirement of a previous with the FAA, for example, or is this just done voluntarily in order to accommodate additional aircraft or grants? Number two, what grants the airport received past and what the mandatory conditions that the airport is beholden to with these grants. Number 3, who is responsible for approving this master plan, the FAA or the city? And number 4, do you expect that the project will require a vote to dedicate parkland and fill in juristic wetlands? Thanks, ma'am.
That concludes public comment. It's not on the agenda.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. We'll on now to council questions, comments, and announcements. Councilmember Vinger.
Just briefly, since the district is dark this month, we've been away, and I've known my climate meetings. Did get my climate yesterday, as Avro mentioned, at the Heat Island mapping training project. I wanted to mention it because they could still use volunteers if any want to join us. But basically, it's part of the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration's project. That's what to most people. PACC is leading it. The 3 cities of Menlo, Palo Alto, and East Palo Alto will be working together. Volunteers drive out with sensor on, and they'll be doing it at 3 times a day. You can only do it 1 time, okay? You'll have a navigator with you, but we will be looking to see which parts of our town are how hot, when, and so we can learn from that so that we can adapt. And I just want to lift that up, and thank you much to PACC and our colleagues for working on that.
Thank you. Councilmember.
Thank you, Mayor. I think tomorrow night there's a finance committee. I do to request the finance committee forget to discuss the ability path grant that they're asking for matching funds, because they have a fundraiser coming up in October that they're hoping to debut at. Thank you for the consideration.
Thank you. My only announcement is just a slight change to some city committees. I have appointed Vice Mayor Lowing to our Stanford App Committee and Councilmember Tanaka to our Schools Committee. And Councilmember Lithcott-Ames.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to acknowledge the news of my poor judgment 13 years ago, which really came to light. I owned it and atoned for it privately a long time ago, and now I've done so publicly. Some advise I say nothing more, but I do want to say more. I want to acknowledge that many of you feel I've betrayed your trust. Understand that. Others of you shown me grace, which frankly I didn't expect. I'm grateful for it. Perhaps you've offered me grace because you know that none of us wants to be forever judged by our worst mistake. Regarding my service to this city, I ask that you judge me on how I do the work. My colleagues and I, and our tremendous staff, and you, the community, striving to achieve our goals for creating more housing, protecting the climate, strengthening our local economy, improving mental health, separating the train from the road, building a community center, fostering a greater sense of belonging in Albo, and so much more. That has not changed. These things are far greater than any person. I remain in service to finding solutions to these vital issues facing all of us, and to do that important work together.
Thank you. And we'll move on now to our consent calendar. These are items 3 through 7. Take a I'm trying to remember, do we do public comment before seeking our motion? It's been 5 weeks. Well, it's we'll do let's actually do first, we'll do a motion to, well, sorry, any requests to, any no votes, requests to pool. I know. I'll to pool item 5. Oh, we have extra lights. Councilmember Koo.
I'll join you in pulling item 5.
Councilmember Lithcott.
I join that and to pull item 5.
Councilmember.
We already have it. Now it's going to do the same.
Item 5 has been pulled. Councilmember Finger, same.
No.
All right. Then, sorry. Item 5 is pulled. Other no votes. Over pool. See no lights. Do we have a motion to move the consent calendar? And we'll take public comment after.
Move.
Moved by Vice, seconded by Councilmember Kerr. And we'll go to public comment before we take the vote.
I have an announcement before we take a comment. 1 moment. We are offering live translation. Any members of the public are interested in making comment in a language other than English. If you wish to do so, you can scan the QR code on the screen or come to the clerk desk for more information on how to have translate services. Our first speaker is Preston P. Speaking on behalf of the 5. Mayor, what?
And we'll do 8 minutes.
Thank you.
Ready? Good evening. My name is Preston Prince. I'm the executive director of the Santa Clara Housing Authority. Good evening, Mayor, council members, staff, and residents of Buena Vista who are today. I came here tonight hoping to be asking for your support on the item consent calendar. We are poised and ready to submit an application that brings $60 million extra equity and exempt debt to this project. The clock is ticking on our ability to bring all of the financing together. I'm disappointed with the item being pulled and moved to next week. Instead of talking about our next steps and celebrating what's happening, it's our time tonight to talk about where we've been, where we're at, and where we hope to go. So I know the Housing Authority purchased the park in 2019. After decades of disassessment, the park was in severe disrepair. The first several years of ownership spent stabilizing the park, dealing with deferred maintenance, repairing and stabilizing the very old gas line, assisting with bringing the park to housing quality standards, and moving families out of standard housing into new units. To make permanent infrastructure improvements, we need to lift all of the codes up. Most of it are well beyond life, can't be lifted, they must be replaced. The city of Palo Alto and Santa Clara funded the acquisition of the site. The Housing Authority committed $30 million to invest in the redevelopment of the park. Last week, ARB committed an additional $27 million. Total, we have $57 million committed for capital commitment or capital improvements. We've spent $3 million on operational maintenance support, bringing our total commitment to $60 million. After addressing the severe immediate needs, we spent the last 18 months engaging residents, including numerous one-on-one meetings, small workshops, town halls. The result is an unprecedented plan to the history and legacy of Buena Vista moving forward. A plan that protects home ownership for all current owners who wish to remain owners and provides a full rental housing for current and new renters. As I stated already, our board approved a total investment of $60 million. I can't stress enough what an extraordinary commitment of funds this is to a single project. The limited amount of housing funds locally and at the state, the Housing Authority stepped up at a level we have never done before to fill the gap to keep this project moving forward. Next week, it is imperative that our streamlined development application be approved. We have the best design possible based on legal, financial, and physical constraints. We have a financing plan that leverages the city and county funds with funds from the Housing Authority, state, and federal dollars, including tax credits, tax-exempt bonds, and a congressionally directed spending commitment. If expenses are increased, we don't know where else to go, and we will lose out on a substantial opportunity. We are ready to submit a tax-exempt applicant for tax credits and tax-exempt bonds for the apartments August 26th. The timing is right in terms of availability of the funding, scoring, and project readiness. These two source funds will bring an additional $60 million to the project. If we miss application, the next opportunity to apply is in 2025. Delays the redevelopment of Buena Vista an additional year. A year that will add more costs, at least $5 million in construction escalation alone. But it isn't just cost, there are additional risks. Changes can occur in the market. There could be higher interest rates, lower equity contribution, increased labor and material costs, unexpected repairs. Or maybe new applicants will come in and compete with us for what will be a smaller pool of funds. And there could be unknown changes made to the state's allocation plan, bumps the project out of being competitive. State has a real impact that endangers the ability to complete this project. Additional time delays add risks to the family. Just this past weekend, there was an electrical fire at the park. Thankfully, no one was hurt. But this highlights the urgent need to redevelop and update all the infrastructure. We are aware that there are a small number of households whose expectations are not being fully met. Honestly, this development is particularly difficult because of our effort to meet everyone's expectations. Unfortunately, we can't. We're replacing housing and meeting all our constraints. We will not meet one's expectation. We just won't. So while we certainly understand where they're coming from, the reality is that we literally do have the space, available funding, or legal means to meet all expectations. Nor is it fair or equitable to hold up the entire development due to the realistic expectations of a few. For each households have reached out to council expressing concerns. 4 times the number of households have affirmed their housing decision and want things to move forward. To be clear, the concerns of a small number of residents are holding up the progress of new homes for over 50 families. This seems extremely unfair. Furthermore, the majority of residents who have expressed that they really need and want us to move forward are the residents who need the safe, affordable homes most. Extremely low-income households who call Buena Vista, they face physical and emotional challenges, are on fixed incomes, and they want this redevelopment to move forward. They can't afford sitting in the housing authority to further delay. We met with some of the city council members in the past to discuss resident concerns and the main benefits and limitations of our plan. We will be available this week to any member who would like to discuss any of the topics before this week's meeting. In closing, we will come back next week with hope that we can move forward, and I look forward to our discussion over the next week. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ditch T.
Good evening. My name is Dick Tran. I'm back again. I live in Buena Vista for 20 years, since 2004 until today. I feel comfortable there. I feel safety there, and I would like to seek the help of a council member, also a housing authority, to move the project forward. I have been waiting a long time, patient, but at least anytime we need to move. So thank you very much for the support. Move the project ahead. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Winter D.
Hi, welcome back from vacation. You look chipper. Okay, I want to say on the one hand, I recognize and agree with the decision to pull this item tonight. I also recognize how authorities need to move forward pace once the last little bits are in place, and I'm looking forward to that next week. But tonight I want you quickly to know my concerns now, so you think about them. And I'm hoping that the attorney's office will do research to confirm some of the information, Housing Authority. I want to just say a little topic. One of the reasons that there are still people that haven't made decisions is they just got, which is great, their final new appraisals just 1 week ago. Appraisals 1 week ago. And it's my understanding that quite a few of them went up in amount. So people can't make rational financial decisions if they don't understand the money situation, money situation. I do want to mention that. Otherwise, I want to say this. I'm concerned of the viability and effectiveness of Palo Alto's live-work preference, which now in question, as we are told it doesn't apply to Section 8 designated lanes, which are going to be at Buena Vista. That includes 2/3 of Buena Vista's apartments. And a disparate impact report to be performed that can be after the approval of the vital things. So it's concerning. And additionally, 2 new applicant wait lists will be used, which is our preference at great disadvantage. The first list would allow 30 days for new applicants from all over the country, the county, to be considered to BV. Only at the end of 30 days would the second list of applicants, the local preference list, be considered to live there. For applicants. I assume would result in Palo Altans or those who work here who live at Buena Vista in the future to at least a degree. Can this list procedure change to support the local preference? That's actually a question, I think, for the attorney's office. I encourage the city attorney to review relevant law and regulations affecting the Palo Alto live work preference, Section 8, and the waiting list structure so the city may determine for itself if any of this can change in support of meaningful and active Palo Alto work preference. Finally, a Housing Authority transportation plan, I hope will be included in the regulatory agreement. And there need good oversight in the regulatory agreement.
Our next speaker is Aram J.
You know, I struggle to understand how some speakers are allowed to go over him and other folks, their very best never think their words are more important than somebody else. There's times I want to speak longer. I like to think they're respecting the other members of the public by not that. Item number 4, correct me if I'm wrong, would be increasing the amount, give the lawyers representing the city against the officers that filed in my book, was a frivolous lawsuit against the city for claiming that the Beautiful Lives Matter mural presented a work environment. I wrote a very short piece back on Monday, July 9th. I'm not even read the entire piece. It's Dave, the Post called Judge's Mural Ruling. On July 11, Santa Clara County Court Judge Yvette Packer should be congratulated for her courage and common sense in dismissing extraordinarily frivolous, right-wing driven work lawsuit. To prevent frivolous lawsuits in the future, cost to the city to this lawsuit should be directly out of the pockets of the 6 Palo Alto police officers who filed it. Now we're increasing because there's an opportunity for them to one more appeal. The amount that we're paying to outside counsel from $102,000 to $120,000. I would request that Molly Stump address the issue of whether the city has authority to take those costs in this lawsuit, if ultimately the city prevails, out of the pockets of the 6 officers for filing this frivolous lawsuit. In reference to item 5, this is not the first time I've raised this issue. I believe that Buena Vista is essentially a segregated environment. I have one son who is African American and presents very much that way, 6'3" or 4", tattooed up. He went over a few years ago to inquire about applying there, and he was met with very offensive behavior by the folks that took applications, and he said, "I don't effing live in a place that's antagonistic." I'm hopeful that you set aside, as I've often under the cover of reparation, at least 20% of these low-income housing for African Americans for historically been driven out by this vile, racist, white supremacist community. We got that around, and this is an opportunity to do that.
Our next speaker is Manuel.
Mayor Stone and member of the Palo Alto City Council. I am speaking on behalf of Home to express our support for item 5 on the agenda, that being Buena Vista redevelopment project. First and foremost, we would like to acknowledge that this process is complex and challenging. Despite this, we commend the Housing Authority for their extensive community engagement. Numerous public meetings and study sessions have provided ample opportunities for resident stakeholders for input and address concerns. The level of transparency and responsiveness is commendable and demonstrates the Housing Authority's commitment to addressing the needs. The redevelopment project utilizes SB 330, which streamlines the approval process for housing projects to address the housing crisis and promote the development of housing. By adding 61 million affordable units to Palo Alto, this project significantly enhances housing options and contributes to a major positive in the community. Key issues discussed in recent meetings, including enhancement of tree canopy, efforts to resolve conflicts and disputes regarding unit sizes, and the inclusions of live Palo Alto preferences have been fully addressed by the authority. And the authority's commitment towards these concerns while balancing the needs of the current residents with the broader community is a pretty the city council to this project when it does come up again, and continue to support initiatives that promote affordability within the community and with the world. So thank you for your attention and thank you for your time.
That concludes public comment and consent calendar items through 7.
Okay, we'll take the vote.
Councilmember Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Lithcott Hames,
Yes.
Mayor Stone, Councilmember Vink,
Yes.
Councilmember Ku,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lam,
Yes.
Member Burt,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Turn it over to the city manager now for city manager comments, and if you can confirm the date that item will be heard.
Yes, item 5 will be heard next week on 12th of August. This was in the staff report and hopefully consistent with any community expectations. All right, let's see. Go to the next slide. Did want to note that in the city council's pit this evening is an information report. As typical, information reports will not be discussed, but did want to flag that a number of activities have been ongoing through the month of July. This is listed as item number 13 on the council's agenda. Again, this is just a report that's available for public awareness in terms of a variety of activities that have been ongoing throughout the last month. Then, being here to August, do want to just point out a number of activities that are planned, including and start with tomorrow evening, which is National Night Out. From 5 to 8 p.m. There are a number of events occurring throughout town, notably at Eleanor Party Park as well as Old Park, and the Palo Alto Department as well as other departments will be attendance. We've got a number of events listed here through the month of August for community awareness and participation. Next slide, please. Also noting that it is back to school month. In fact, back to school week next week on the 14th and 15th, which I believe are next week. We have our Alto schools in session. So an important time to remind ourselves as drivers, as taxi drivers in cases, and parents in taking kids to school, as well as recognizing that we have a number of students that are on foot, on bike around our campuses throughout town. So again, important time for us to remind ourselves of being aware of our surroundings and courteous to our users of our public rights of way. Next slide, please. Also, a few engagement programs ongoing right now. We have invitations out to community members to sign up, participate in a downtown housing area plan advisory board. Same for University Avenue Streetscape stakeholder group and our Youth Climate Advisory Board, all of which have individual deadlines in here in the next week or two. And finally, we have opportunity for feedback for community members on topics including downtown King, California Avenue, and the Palo Alto Airport. A number of ongoing activities for community members to participate in. Slide, please. Then want to flag for public awareness that we'll be holding our first City Hall open house on December 18th. This will be, as I said, our first to it that will follow our very successful municipal services open house that we had a couple of weeks ago. And so here, Wednesday, September 18th, 5 p.m., that we will be happy to host members of the community throughout City Hall, opportunity to see in the scenes what's going on, and there's some of the on-work projects that staff and other partners are working on. Just save the date. At this point, we'll have more details as the date gets closer. Next slide, please. Looking forward to a few of the upcoming city council meetings listed here, recognizing council just action here for next week, August 12th. We do have these 3 items, the Amino Real related change to the residential parking program, zoning, housing related municipal code changes, and the annual work plans from your Planning Transportation Commission, Historic Source Board, and Architectural Review Board, all on your agenda. In addition, we will add the Buena Vista Mobile Home Park development project at the top of the agenda. That mean that the time may be compressed for these items. We will adjust accordingly as needed in your discussion next week. Then the following week, August 19th, we'll have a number of study sessions. 3 in particular, 2 from our Human Relations Mission that includes the research on lived experience of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders, and also the results of listening sessions for local experiences on Islamophobia, Arab hate, and anti-Semitism. Those are 2 study sessions from our Human Relations Mission, and a 3rd session ready to follow up on the city auditor's nonprofit risk management audit. And all study sessions did want to note that all testimony will need to be in person, so there will be no remote, virtual Zoom public testimony on study sessions. And finally, on the 18th, we have the Transportation Management Plan. We want to note, looking forward into September, that there will be no meeting on September 2nd due to the Labor Day, and the following week, September 9th, have a progress report or sustainability and climate action. With that, Mr. Mayor, to you.
Wonderful. Thank you for those updates. 2-hour break, about 45 minutes behind. Do we need a break now? Maybe after our first action, see how we're feeling?
After these.
Sound good. We'll get through the week
That's
first.
what I said.
Alrighty, so let's move on to item 8. Public hearing, consideration of objections for weed abatement assessments and adopt a resolution confirming the weed abatement report. Turn it to, I believe, city staff first.
Yes, we do have both representatives of our department that administers the program for the city, as well as, although I hadn't seen a representative from the county that does the weed abatement programs. Really at council's question, and given we are behind schedule, may want to see if we've got any public speakers and proceed with action.
Sounds good.
Our first speaker is AJ.
I'm going to be brief, but I just want to let you know, I know that I've sent some respondents directly to mayor, but Fire Marshal Tamara Jao is really outstanding. I've submitted a whole bunch of Public Records Act requests regarding safety of a apartment complex, city of Palo Alto, both a fire inspection aspect and on hazmat, and a whole bunch of questions. And she's been extraordinarily patient in answering those questions, coming back with the reinspection requests of the owner of the property, another reinspection, hazmat side, and just really want to say that I'm extraordinarily impressed with Fire Marshal in the city of Palo Alto. I also know from part of the public request that I made with her that their first staff were short in terms of being able to do inspections of apartment complexes and other rentals in the city of Palo Alto, which makes it very, very difficult. And I worry that we don't have enough folks to do the inspections across the city for our renters. That cost us lives. And of course, very supportive. And I don't know why we can't afford the wealthiest city of 60,000, probably certainly in the country, if not in the world, a fire truck for station number 4. We need it fully staffed. You all, the city council, need to push the city manager away. Fourth highest paid.
Mr. J, we appreciate compliments of our fire department. Do you have a point regarding weed abatement?
You know, I think I've said enough, and I appreciate your allowing me to speak of the fire department here. And I just to know that our city manager is the 4th high paid city.
Yeah, we appreciate. We know. Let's move on to. Is there any more public comment?
That concludes public on item 8.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll bring it back. Staff.
Yes, Mayor, given that, again, the opportunity public hearing was to consider objections from affected property owners. Here, we have a resolution recommended for your action.
Councilmember Coop.
Thank you. I do want to ask about certain property, 3120 Cowper. That one, I know the owner of that property is actually in a home, and I mean in a senior home, comfortable home. So how are the message getting to her with regards to this? So she's no longer living in the property.
We send all documentation that we have through the address that's on the deed to the assessor's office. If she needs to make a change, so she can reach out to the recorder's office and change the add on file with the assessor's office, be able to change our mailing list.
Okay, and the reason I'm saying it because I don't believe, she's capable of understanding other things. So she's supposed to reach out to your office?
She can reach out to our office and we can work with her, or if she has a power of attorney or anybody assisting her, we will be able to work with and supply them with the documentation or get documentation depending on what is the documentation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, so thank you. I'll let to her through her attorney, power of attorney to get them to you. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions, comments, or entertain motions as well?
No kidding, right? Yeah.
Well, none, I'll move the recommendation.
Second?
I don't need to do it. Councilmember? No? Any discussion on the motion? None, let's take the vote.
Councilmember Vinker,
Yes.
Vice Selling,
Yeah.
Mayor Stone, Councilmember Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Ku,
Yes.
Councilmember Burton,
Yes.
Mayor Lipcott Hames.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimous.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Need a break? Are you ready to go on to 9? Feeling good? All right. So moving on to item 9, public hearing, adoption of a resolution implementing the North Ventura Coordinated Area Plan, also known as NVCAP. Staff presentation.
So, Mayor Stone and City Council members, clerk's pulling up the slides. I'll just, I'm Jonathan Lake, Director for Planning and Development Services. Before we ask Ms. Kelly Cha, Senior Planner in our department, to provide an overview of the North Ventura Coordinated Area Plan, I just wanted to take a moment to recognize that this is the creation of a 7-year effort to develop a vision for a walkable North Ventura neighborhood with housing services, ground floor retail, parks, and an interconnected street grid. I would like to take a moment to just thank the council-appointed working group that participated in this process, gave their input and guidance throughout this process, as well as the City Council. Your various reviews, direction to staff. It was November 2022 when the City Council last saw a version of this plan and identified a preferred plan. Since we have had various meetings with the Architecture Review Board, the Planning and Transportation Commission, and have revised or refined that council preferred plan into the document before you today. And I think it's changed a little bit in areas from what the council looked at in November 2022, but we believe it's generally consistent with the spirit and intent of where the council wing. And if we're happy to make some changes as needed tonight. With that, Ms. Cha, would you mind doing the presentation?
Good evening. My name is Kelly Cha. I'm going to start the presentation for the North Ventura Coordinated Area Plan. I'm going to refer to it as NVCAP for the presentation. Next, please. So these are the objectives for the item. Essentially, staff would like City Council to adopt the NVCAP, an ordinance implementing the NVCAP, and certified supplemental EIR prepare for the NVCAP. Next, please. And this shows the NVCAP boundary. The area is located in the North Ventura neighborhood. And it is close to California Avenue Business District, California Caltrain Station, and Stanford Research Park. This is the 6-acre plan area that includes some notable features like the Matador Creek. Next, please. And this is one slide basically summarized the 7-year process of the NVCAP and some milestones that has reached from initiation in 2017 to today's adoption with the City Council. Next, please. Upon initiation in 2017, the City Council endorsed these 6 goals. Next, please. And these 6 objectives that have helped guide the development of plan. Next, please. The NVCAP included an extensive public engagement throughout the process. It includes 2 community workshops, 7 working group meetings, 6 stakeholder meetings, as well as online serves. And that's in addition to numerous study sessions and public hearings with boards and commissions, as well as the City Council. From these meetings, especially from the working group meetings, a total of 12 alternatives were developed, and consultant and staff team presented 3 alternatives to PACC and City Council to consider back in 2022. Next, please. After consideration of 3 alternatives, City Council endorsed preferred plan in January 2022. In November of the same year, there were some additional refinements were made to the first plan, but still it includes 130 net new units, approximately 2 acres of new park, and reduction of office and retail to accommodate additional housing. And staff consultant team prepared draft and kept document and was supplemental EIR in March 2024. Next, please. Staff took draft NDCAP and the supplemental ER to the ARB Architectural Review Board and Planning and Transportation Commission. The board review focused on the zone ordinance development states and suggested some changes to proposed NDCAP development standards. And PTC recommended included adopting NVCAP zoning and considering supplemental EIR as well as additional changes listed here. And the motion was passed. Next, please. Staff incorporated suggested change from the ARB and PD, but there's some items highlighted in here green that didn't get reflected. There were various versions, maximum height limit during the discussion with the ARB and PTC. The final height limit reflected in the NVCAP document today reflects the various versions from ARB and PTC, as well as some staff recommendations. And the additional things like new method for measuring setback and calculating lot coverage for buildings with base as recommended. This is a larger policy driven that's needed. So staff recommend for wide implementation and a special setback request from PTC extending the existing Park Boulevard special set to NCAP area that actually requires separate procedures and additional analysis for those properties impacted. And so staff had to actually not reflect in the document. So next, please. The draft document for tonight is organized to 7 distinct chapters, and these chapters include introduction and the vision and 4 design guidelines chapters, and the implementation chapter rounds out the document. This reads all of the incorporation of the feedback received from the ARB, PTC, and some staff recommendations as well as my corrections. Next, please. And the zone implementation, the Document B, the ordinance includes the new NV Zone District chapter. It introduces the chapter is structurally like other zone chapters, includes applicability in district, permitted use, development standard, parking, and load. The zoning ordinance includes no parking requirements and reflects the limit increase, other changes according to ARB and PC discussions, please. And per se requirement, supplemental EIR was prepared and found several impacts that are significant can be limited to a significant level, and 2 were found significant and avoidable. During the 45-day public comment period, we received 3 comments from public agencies like Valley and Caltrans, but these comments actually impact the analysis draft EIR, and the final supplemental EIR was prepared with more response to the comments, and so CEQA finding statement of overall considerations, mitigating measures, and reporting program was prepared and included in attachment, please. And staff presentation conclude with the staff recommendation, essentially adopting a resolution to approve the NVCAP and introducing an ordinance to implement the NVCAP as well. Next, please. This concludes the staff presentation, and we are ready to answer any questions. And in addition to staff here, we have Coleman Frick behind us, and as well as some consult team, Shannon George and Natalie No from DJ Powers, there are environmental consultant, and William Gardner from Air Transportation Consultant, and we have some additional from Transportation as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
Cool.
Then we turn it over for comment.
Actually, if we could, sorry, I believe Mr. Lee has something to add.
I'd also share that the Planning and Transportation Liaison, Dorima, and Architecture Review Board representative, are both here to respond to any questions that the council may have.
And then one last PS would be simply to acknowledge Ms. Cha is actually gave her first presentation to City Council. She joined, I believe, about 8 months ago. And this is, but certainly you will get used to seeing her as she is on a number of long-range planning efforts. So I wanted to acknowledge that for Council's awareness.
Let's see how it goes.
Well, thank you and congratulations. Very good first presentation. Let's turn it over for public comment. How many speakers do we have?
We have a total of 9, that including a group of 5.
Okay. All right.
And 2 more just raised hands on Zoom.
So we'll do 7 minutes for the group and 2 minutes for the individual speakers since we're open.
Our first speaker is Jeff L.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. I'm here tonight to speak specifically about the proposed ordinance elimination of all parking requirements for North Ventura, which I believe was not anything that you previously saw. The staff report justifies this by saying that, quote, AB 2097 exempts developed projects within a half mile of transit from minimum parking requirements, unquote. But that sentence in the staff report fails to explain that AB 2097 includes a number of exceptions. It's a myth that AB 2097 actually exempts all parking requirements. First and foremost, AB 2097 only applies to new development. The proposal in front of you for North Ventura would also exempt parking for existing developments. Who need to do that to comply with AB 2027? Palo Alto's long-standing parking rules are based on many studies and much experience, so why existing buildings no longer need parking when the state doesn't require that? Second, AB 2097 explicitly says that the city generally still require parking if there otherwise be significantly negative impact on existing parking in the vicinity. Streets in Ventura area are already filled with cars at night. All parking in El Camino and several streets is also eliminated. Requiring no on-site parking will have a significant negative impact. It should be easy to demonstrate this conclusively. Once you do, AB 2097 becomes moot in those cases. Third, AB 2097 explicitly states it does not eliminate city-required electric vehicle charging spaces and accessible parking spaces. Our staff has not interpreted this part of the law correctly and claimed AB 2097 doesn't allow us to require charging and accessible spaces. But please listen close to these words from state's own legislative analyst and decide for yourself. The legislative analyst says that does not, quote, reducing, eliminating, or precluding the enforcement of any requirement imposed on a housing development project that is located with 1/2 mile of public transit to provide electric vehicle supply equipment installed park spaces or parking spaces that are accessible to persons with disabilities, end of quote. If that's not enough, here's what Hank Brady, the analyst for the very state assembly committee that drafted the bill, said, quote, the bill provides an exception to ensure developments that reduce parking under this bill are still required to provide the minimum EV and accessible parking space that would otherwise be required by law, end of quote. Yet the proposal in front of you for North Ventura eliminates both these requirements. By doing so, you harm the environment by discouraging electric vehicles and harm people with disabilities who need parking near to where they live by removing accessible spaces they would use. This ordinance is going backwards, not forwards. Fourth, AB 2097 may yet be found by court to be unconstitutional, or it could be altered by the legislature on the road. Why do we want our local code to require no park spaces under those circumstances? Perhaps staff point to where the EIR ever considered the impact of requiring no parking throughout North Ventura. The EIR explained that existing street parking will be entirely eliminated at Park, Boulevard, Ash, and Lambert, partly eliminated Olive and Portage. It does not say what happened on El Camino. I could find no analysis in the EIR what happens when you combine all of the proposed street parking reduction and have no parking on El Camino and no on-site parking requirements. We should have an analysis of the extra traffic, people looking for parking spaces, the proper tenants trying to charge their electric vehicle, and the impact of people with disability. What's the point of having an EIR if it doesn't look what may be the biggest change people in North Ventura will experience? I do have a bit of good news. There's a simple and prudent fix for much of this that you can enact tonight. All you need to do is amend the ordinance to retain our current local parking rules. That still allows new projects, even they qualify parking reductions or AB 2097 to apply for. The city then decide if the requested reductions comply with the state law. But there's no reason if parking reductions existing building or when there was a significant negative impact on parking in the area, to electric vehicle charging spaces, parking for people with disabilities. AB 2097 requires none of that. So, along with any other changes you may make tonight, please revise the ordinance to leave our current parking requirement in place. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Beck S.
All righty. All right, thank you. Good evening, council members. I sent you all a letter on Saturday. If you missed it, here are a few concerns. My name is Becky Saunders, by the way. I live in Ventura. Why again is the Ventura neighborhood treated if the quality of our lives is not as valuable as the quality of the lives of human in other neighborhoods? No other neighbor is being asked to absorb 140 units without any required parking There are no minimum parking requirements at all. Does that mean cars will be banned? There will have a car. The project will limit to folks with limited mobility. It's really clear the way that this is written. Only Ventura being asked to cozy up buildings that are 60-foot high will loom over the entire area. There's a 55 building plan, potentially will loom for parkland, the creek, and the below grade housing complex. Once again, BMR gets the shaft. The promise of the cap has vanished. One thing NIMBYs, the residentials, the BMR housing gets in the majority of the council on. Let's build a livable, walkable neighborhood made of predominantly housing with amenities. What we're getting is a pile of mixed use, high rises, even more offices without guaranteed community serving retail and businesses. One of my neighbors who I asked to come tonight said he wasn't coming. He said, I have lived in Ventura for 4+ years. My experience in the city of Palo Alto has been less than positive. The city will ask for community input regarding decisions when in fact at the time they've already made up minds. So, about what they're going to do, and it's usually based on money. How to get more money, more tax revenue. So there's no, it's very inefficient, and there's a lack of accountability at City Hall. If I ran my business in such an inefficient manner, I would be out of work. That's what he quoted to me. So I would appreciate, I think lots of interns also would appreciate council. We have the power, we have budgeted you with direct staff to correct this continued bullying and abuse of Ventura. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker, Terry H.
I brought exhibit today to show the council how hard it worked. As part of the PACC working group, I spent more than 2.5 years working this project. I want to say that I was appointed by you and your colleagues, former colleagues, tasked with the overall mission to review the NVCAP area and make a series of recommendations or alternatives to the council. We went up this task in a very serious, time-consuming, lasting more, like I said, 2 years, some of which you see here in this exhibit. Unfortunately, this is only half what we examined, but it is very unfortunate that most of that process was either ignored or forgotten about or overlooked, both city staff and, fortunately, the previous council. And a more secret process about with the NVCAP developer launched and implemented. At most of the NV meetings, we agreed that we did want more office development. We agreed that housing was extremely important, but not so much as to destroy the nature and character of the surrounding neighborhood. Adding 65 feet in high-density buildings was never the majority of the working group, nor was it desired. In fact, some of us developed an alternative called Alternative M, which you may recall not only increased affordable housing, but it also allowed the historical preservation of a very significant part of California and Palo Alto history. Tonight, you should recognize the very value of the citizens who worked and made recommendations to council. Okay, thank you.
Next speaker is Tom G.
Hello, I'm Tom Gilman. I'm an architect and designed a number of buildings in Palo Alto over the years. And I'm here requesting support on behalf of the property owners that may have existing office buildings that will become non-conforming and be subject to significant restrictions. And, very often, these are very expensive leased buildings, market rate, say, office buildings. And as, all of us, the market in Silicon Valley right now is very, very slow. And because of that, it can take a considerably long time to get a building leased or released if necessary. And as developer-owned buildings, there is not necessarily control if a tenant may go out for whatever reason and terminate lease. But at the same point, it's going to be issue if building. I think that non-conforming buildings have or something of that nature that need to be released, and that may or may not be possible in the current economic climate. And at the time, what happens if an earthquake comes along, damage a building or something, and that, the need for rebuilding building? It seems like that there are very restrictive conditions with these buildings that may immediately become non-conforming with the passing of the current language in the ordinance. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Jeanette Delia.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Good evening, council members. My name is Jeanette Dalia, and I'm the COO of Paul Company of 395 Pinell Road. I'm sorry we're coming too late in the process, but we have recently learned that one of the proposed changes in the VCAP could negatively impact our property in ways we had not previously anticipated. While we're generally supportive of the plan and the much residential units it will provide, the plan would rezone property from Rome NV4 R4 with the existing use, a commercial office building now designated as non-conforming, and such as Section 1870 of the Muni Code. This change in non-conforming status presents risk to future continued use of our building, as well as potential rebuilding risk in event of a casualty. To clarify, abandonment provision, Section 18C, would prohibit us from reusing the building as an office building if in a bad real estate market, and despite our efforts, we're unable to secure it within a year from previous tenant's lease expiration. Moreover, Section 870 would prohibit us from rebuilding as a commercial use in the event the building was destroyed or damaged by fire, earthquake, or a casualty. We hope you can appreciate these challenges, and as such, we respectfully request that our existing commercial office use zone designation be grandfathered in such a way that the use remain conforming, so that we can feel confident that our site can be productive as a commercial use in the near to midterm, while we welcome the possibility of residential in the future. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker, Cedric.
Good evening, council members. Thank you for taking this item. The NVCAP plan indicates that renaturalization of Matadero Creek would be Park Boulevard to Lambert. But to be clear, it is strictly outside the NVCAP envelope. The planned renovation of Boulevard Park carefully crafted to allow the creek to be naturalized and opened up to Boulevard Park. My recollection is that the city council approved this concept, so it would be more clear on the scope of the renaturalization, so we don't leave any out when we start plan for that project. I hope that council will direct staff to start soon to plan for the naturalization of the creek and the creation of the park space in the area that would obtain from Sobrato. And in addition, the increased heights to 65 feet in some cases, with possible, if I understand, 33 increases for 100% affordable housing is indeed alarming. However, there is also a day plane which applies and helps to prevent looming over adjacent residential uses. But I think it's also important to be aware of the height which the daylight plane commences. We might commonly assume that it starts at 8 or 10 feet above the property line, but in some of these cases, the angled part of the day plane may actually start at about 20 feet high at the edge of the property line. So that's actually kind of high for certain residential uses immediately adjacent to that. It could be for you to hear exactly what is the envelope of the light plane, so to be sure that you're not approved projects are going to be looming over the neighbors. Otherwise, I generally approve this plan, and I hope you'll approve it today. Thanks.
Our next speaker is Aaron.
The young family, my sons are now 53 and 46, lived in the Ventura neighborhood. And my boys got to see other Afro-American youth. It's a historically Black community, as you own that area, one of the few areas in Palo Alto that historically Black folks were allowed to live in. Many of them have been driven out of the community. We need to make sure you have to amend, got to do whatever you can to make certain 20% of the housing minimum of this project is dedicated to African-American members of the African-American community in perpetuity. It's not enough to just have a plaque that says, hey, there's a historically Black community. That tokenism and symbolism of the worst kind. As a public defender, people in that community meet well. It was extraordinarily over-policed, the vile, racist Palo Alto Police Department, and I frequently calls, which I took to come to homes that were being harassed by members of the police department, sure that people understood the rights via the police. It's really a historic community that needs to be recognized and not in a total fashion. You all need to make certain that reparations is not simply a word, but something that you implement voluntarily out of the good spirit to make amends for the historic wrongs visited on the Black community and the continued violence perpetrated by the police in this country, which now the most individuals, most police killings in the history of this country. It's been monitored by the Washington Post, occurred last year. Thank you.
That concludes public comment on action item 9.
You will return to the dais for council member questions and comments. Councilman.
Thank you. For staff, so the speaker said that there is no need, so there's absolutely no parking for people with disabilities at all, and there's no EV car allowed in there either for parking. And this is a 530 units development in, right?
So I think the projected yes is a number, yes. But with regard to the parking and to just provide a couple things. One is no EV. So the code's not saying you can't provide those. It's saying that it's not required. And when I say code, proposed ordinance would not require parking. And the way that the city has applied this is that we typically require ADA parking and electric vehicle parking when other parking spaces are being provided as a part of the development in accordance with the code. And with AB 2097, there's parking requirement, so the city not imposed ADA or vehicle parking on the project. This is consistent with other jurisdictions in the area, how they've approached AB 2097. We agree, as Mr. Levitsky had noted in the state law, that there is provision to local jurisdiction to require EV and accessible parking spaces, notwithstanding the fact we can't require regular parking spaces, what I'll call regular spaces. And we have an ordinance coming to City Council, I think now in September, to implement various state law changes where we flag this issue. This is a conversation that's come up in the Transportation Commission. And it really does require a policy conversation. And it's just something that we want to implement in NVK as a one-off solution to that. We think has broader implications in areas of the city that are also sub AB 2097. The challenge, and we'll get into it later, whenever the council wants to, we're planning to do it in December, is that if you have a spot, say downtown, which is also subject to AB 2097 or any of the properties on California Avenue, and we require ADA parking spaces or EV parking, that have a significant effect on what gets built there. Many of those lots are small and cannot really accommodate drive-outs or access without having locations to what is being contemplated proposed for development. And without imposing any sort of judgment on whether that's good or bad, it requires some understanding before we just say we'll start requiring EV parking and ADA parking alone in isolation out other parking space. It could have a total effect on housing production or other development that may be posed. So we don't disagree. That's a path that's available to the city. We want to do that. We just think we need to have more of a conversation about it. Staff needs to do more on it and present it to the decisioners. So I'll pause there and see if you have any further questions.
Right. So on this particular, so first, welcome, Ms. Shah and Mr. Frank. I heard your presentations. It was really good. Thank you. So what you're asking us to do tonight is also to adopt certain chapter of the municipal code. Is part of it the parking adopted to say that we actually not have any minimums and it's not required? Because so for the question, is what you're telling us to adopt for MV or is a citywide?
The ordinance that's before you tonight does not require parking for use except for hotels, which is carved out of state law in the North Ventura Coordinated Area Plan boundary.
Okay.
And if I can that please a moment, I will. And this was something that we had in the staff report, but I'll bring it to the council's attention. When we came up with recommendation, and actually, clerk, we're going to share a slide. When we came up with this recommendation, the image on the left, I don't know if you can make that full screen, is a map of A 2097. We thought initially applied and you see it's measured from the totality of the Caltrain station. And when it's measured that, we can see I guess that's an orange-ish sort of outline of the NV-cap battery, and you can see it large covers the entire area. We thought, okay, if that's the case, it should just apply to the whole boundary to minimize confusion, since there was that one little corner not included. Since understood a refined map of AB 2097, it measured and shown on the right. And so that actually raises the question, I think, in a way that we hadn't fully anticipated before when we were first in the report. And it does begin the door, I think, a little bit into a conversation about what parking ought to be required for the balance properties that are not located within the AB 2097 boundary. And so if the council were interested in doing that, that's a straightforward direction to staff that you could direct us to apply the municipal code parking standards for any of the land uses area outside of AB 2097. And that's the direction that we get and make changes to the ordinance and to plan if you wanted to go that route. So we'll leave. I'll stop there and just know that's probably a council policy conversation you may have to staff.
Thank you. And I know time is out come, but then I just want to add this question also. And how are we addressing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging when we're not including people who need parking for ADA or for, I think that's a discussion that we should really be thinking about also. It doesn't fit into what the council has uttered and has been put as a priority. Thank you.
Mayor Lowry.
Thanks very much. My old friend VCAP is back. I've dealt with this for years in the commission. I think and hope we're closer to the finish line than we were, Ben. I have a number of comments and I'll watch my time to be considerate of. But my first priority comment was going to be exactly this issue. Just want to tag along on this. I noticed that there, with the new boundary, that there's some areas do have applicability. So to me, I would at the least say that we should retain parking in that area that's not covered. But I didn't know anything that I heard from Mr. Levinsky. So at some point in this conversation, I wonder if there's other, legal opinions on, what we can do with the current laws that are in place for parking. So a question on the special SAC, which was a pretty big issue with PTC, and I've read the PACC a few times, and to me, it sounds like you're saying that you just have to sort of do more study. And so the implication that you're going to do more study and maybe add this to the ordinance.
That is a possibility if the city council like for the staff to actually, sorry, I'm going to start again. That is a possibility if the city council would like this to actually look into it, but that will actually part of the NB cap. That is something came up during Planning and Transportation Commission discussion. And a special setback, as you may already know, that map hasn't actually modified since 1950s, I believe. It doesn't that it cannot be modified, but it's just that we to have a specific analysis how it's going to impact those properties that are adding Park Boulevard.
No, I understood that, and I have no objection. I get what you're trying to do. I'm saying, was there sort of indication that you were going to look at, or is that something for us to take the initiative?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, council would have to give us direction to do that.
Okay. There's comments from the public on there's too much office, no question about that from the get-go. So reduction in office was planned, particularly for the office to housing ratio. So questions there. One existing office park, 3241 office, about 7,800 square feet. Is being grandfathered in essentially because already an application, and that's what we've agreed to do.
That if it is deemed complete, that is considered pipeline project that was considered prior to the NB caption.
Right. Just out of interest, is that a requirement? Do we have the option to say, sorry, I made a new law here? I'm not saying it. It's just an inquiry.
Actually, Mr. Yang, if you're on, maybe may want to weigh in on this question is whether we don't pipeline projects, I guess. Is that what you're saying? Can we exclude pipeline projects? Is that ultimately the question? Mr. Yang?
Yes, we could exclude them. That could be a feature of the ordinance.
And then the number of units, when you look at the I think there's just something in the matter, so I'd like to get it clear for myself and colleagues in the public. For the housing element, pick 16 housing opportunity sites in the NCAP with about 300 dwelling units. But earlier that was on package 204. And the previous one has said, as built out, the NCAP would add 530 new dwelling units. So does that mean that only 300 of them are in the housing element? We're really going to put up 530 units? Could be tiny or something like that. I just want to make sure those are correct.
So yeah, they're not exclusive. The housing element projections are about 300, and the totality housing production anticipated over 2040 horizon is about 50 or so for that plan.
That's kind of what I was expecting. How's my time? Oh, I'm with this round then. I can't do anything in 10 seconds. Oh. One of my colleagues can move.
Councilmember Lithcott-Ames.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the thorough presentation. I particularly enjoyed the transcript of the PT meeting, which I read in its entirety from May 8th. Really come up to speed on a topic that I'm relatively new to since I served on the PC. Others have or been on council on. Emanating from that important conversation between PTC, which ARB Balte attended, I found myself wanting to know more about the adequacy of AR and height limits versus daylight plane when trying to control the mass of building and its impact on whatever is around it. Chair Balte made a beautifully compelling argument for why daylight plane is a more sophisticated tool. And I'm raising this because ultimately we have staff recommendation on height limits that in a couple of respects is less than what the ARB recommended. And I think it was Chalte's recommendation or urging that if we appreciate the significance of daylight plane, we could have heights and not be worried about those impacts. So I'm wondering if we could hear thoughts on that. And if perhaps Chair Balte wants to share some thoughts as well, if that's appropriate, that's that through the mayor.
We can address the staff piece. I'd like to ask Mr. Coleman-Frick to respond to why staff had slightly different recommendations relative to height from the PD and ARB.
Thank you so much for the question. I think anyone who's reading the staff order, reading the minutes, probably maybe a little bit difficult to track the different recommendations of the different pieces and ultimately brought to the city council. As staff was evaluating those recommendations and really looking at them closely, we were compelled also by kind of the daylight plane as a mechanism to reduce unintended impacts to existing developed single-family residential properties. And we thought that was a mechanism that would work well in a lot of cases, but we also looked at all of the work that had gone into getting to the point through the working group to the council refined endorsed plan. And so we wanted to sort of balance both of those things in terms of make it so there was an ability, the vision of the NVCAP to be completed in terms of sort of development could realistically occur from a kind of a standpoint from developer to the units and the vision of NVCAP to be a walkable sort of, mixed use development. And so some places we did recommend increasing height limit based on those recommendations, but in other cases, didn't go quite as high as what was recommended for maximum height in an effort to make sure that there was between those existing developed properties a bit of a height differential between those zoning districts.
Thank you. I did feel that Chair Balt's explanation was quite pertinent. And I wonder if there's any merit, may I ask him through you, Mayor, to share his explanation for why perhaps a different way of thinking about it is valuable?
Yeah, your time, so Mr. Balte can be in listening, that'd be appreciated.
Thank you very much. I'm not aware I was quite so elegant, but when you use a daylight plane, you can building be taller and minimize the impact neighboring community and houses. In this particular case, especially, the tallest buildings really along El Camino, and then one or two alongside of Lampert Avenue, which is actually across the street from other residences anyway. But What's in front of you, a proposal to put buildings on El Camino down 45 feet, which is feet less than this here now, and that wouldn't even allow a 5-story building. And they want to have 6-story things to get 6-story housing out 10 feet for each floor. Want to have retail on ground. They need more than 10 feet, 12 or 13 feet for the retail. You're bumping, you can't do 45 feet, even 55 tight. If we're serious about having more housing, give it space in a place where it doesn't affect us so much. It's along El Camino. Trust that a light plane will minimize the impact on the surrounding community while allowing us to have higher building masses. Architects are capable of using the daylight to get taller buildings without impacting everybody else much.
Thank you very much.
Well, you were right, Mary Ellen. Councilmember Burt.
Thanks to my colleagues for raising a number of my issues. I have follow-ups on several of them and some others. Maybe I'll start with last, just a comment. I very much agree that daylight lanes are very important, but there is additional element for setbacks at up floors, and that is the sense of mass and the imposing nature of a building. Or it may not be appropriate, and it could be at a site where it does not, by virtue of our solar pattern, does necessarily a daylight shadow impact, but it can have a scale. And this is like what we did on El Camino across the street, and some of the tall buildings we've endorsed. We require upper floors to be set back, in part because of daylight, because also because of the whole tilling effect that you have in the street. Second, I want to go back to the parking issue. Several aspects of it. First, the geographic boundary of half mile from the Calhoun station. The AB 2997 was a pretty blunt tool by the legislature that supersedes local zoning and parking requirements. It's not a refinement, it's not nuanced, blunt tool. I have no idea why we would even consider extending it outside of that area without a policy decision by the council that said, oh, we think AB 97 is a great idea, we ought to extend it more in the community, which I would not support. So on that basis, I don't think we should extend it on where it's required, plain and simple. And I don't think we would have considered, so if not there in original reports, it extended to virtually all the NVCAP site. And then I want to go to this issue of EV and ADA parking and ask if we get a citywide policy we set on exemptions that are permitted under AB 2097, or it certainly seems to be based on the language of in the law and the legislative record, which all informs the intent of the law. How would that, if we adopt this now, would we only have a narrow window under which we might get products that would be proposed or go through entitlements that would perhaps eliminate or not exempt them from what would be planning on imposing in the future on E's and ADA part? How would that apply if we're approved now and later a couple months approving a refinement to it?
So, and I'll ask Mr. Yang to listen to my words and correct me if I'm wrong on that. So if you adopt what's for you now, which does not have a requirement for EV or ADA parking spaces, and a product comes forward before that policy is enacted, it's possible that you could impose or require that those products comply with your policy change on requiring ADA and EV parking. It might get a little tricky for some housing projects where they file an application consistent with, a 330 application is locked into the standard place at the time, regardless of whether you change the policy. So you do that special housing projects. And also, we're teeing a conversation in September. We actually don't have the policy language mapped out. I mean, the policy language isn't big of a deal,
Okay.
right?
I think for the moment that addresses my concern. Let me just try to finish up on King and then I'll come back hopefully in a subsequent round. What about this issue of existing developed? Levinsky asserted that the way the plan is written, the AB 2097 would apply, the parking exemption would apply even existing development. They could get rid of their existing parking.
So again, I'll ask our attorney to be stay on this, but that we've addressed this, and I believe the question that's come up before City Council, it talks about development, and new development doesn't mean building a new project from scratch. It could be a tenant improvement. It could be a conversion of one use to another. The code does specify, I don't think, specifically what that is. And I think there's, and Yang, feel free to weigh in here.
2097 doesn't. It talks to development and maybe a broad definition than we customarily think.
I believe that's correct. Yang?
That's right. AB 27 uses the development project for this part. And then in some cases, it uses the term development for kind of more specific instructions. So we see that word development product as being better than like a tear down and build.
How broad? I mean, that sounds like a real slippery slope. What are these bounds?
Right. Development project, it's not simply defined in AB 97, but where the government could, it seems to mean basically anything requires a building permit.
Well, I don't know the answer, but that sounds like a subject that's open to legal interpretation. Not sure that was intent of the law, but I don't think we have case law yet. So I don't want to just accept on value that it does apply to anything and everything. That just seems like an escape to get rid of all existing parking, just parking on development, which understanding was the intent of that law was to apply to incentivize new development, not minor renovation, whatever that might fall under that category.
Another round.
Yeah, I just want to wrap up on the parking. I guess last part question: Are we confident that the parking impacts have been covered in the EIR?
So the California Environmental Quality does not have parking as a criterion to assess environmental impacts. It's not something we study as a part of EIR parking.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Vinger?
Thank you. All right, coming at this point, I'll just add in a couple. I'll make a comment about what was just discussed and then add in a couple new topics. First of all, I'm really intrigued by the discussion of height versus daylight plane versus massing, and because for me, I'm a little put to daylight, and so I'm very intrigued by this idea, but I'm also cognizant of all three aspects. I'm wondering if staff to just respond to the totality of those and how they work together, and how that affect your recommendation about the height. Just if there's anything additional that those comments spurred, and then I'll move on to my points. Because I was eloquent.
Yeah, we're gonna pull up a couple slides that I think will illustrate the question.
Well, maybe we're doing well. Go.
So this is a sample slide. Let me make it full. It's showing how the plane works with the setback, and it's just an elevation, one elevation of the existing projects that we have received. So it shows this is a 10-foot start height for the daylight plane. This is required for the properties that are adjacent low density district in PACC. So it'll start daylight plane angle, which is 45 degrees, will start at 10 feet. And that is in addition to the setback requirement. And with that daylight plane, you wouldn't be able to have a building that eats that line. But that's sort of a way to kind of limit mass and bulk impacts for especially low density.
Make sure I'm following you. If, say, for example, at 35-foot mark, if whatever that one is above that says 3-bedroom, that block, if it's far back, it could go up 35 feet as long as it didn't cross over that 5-degree line. Okay. So that's quite interesting. Okay, so, but is it your thought that we need to lower to not, taking into account the daylight? Or would we not take the higher recommended heights from ARB and still apply daylight plane to those?
The daylight plane will apply regardless of the limits.
Mhm.
It's that the height limit, as you can see, 60, the density bonus 50 line is here. I believe that is something, this is maximum height limit, this particular property. And they added additional height because of the density bonus that you can see here. So we're still meeting the density bonus here. So regardless of the height limit, whether it's 65 or 55 or 45, this daylight will apply regardless.
So you could daylight plane as another mechanism to regulate height. I think what we try to balance, and can you go to that slide that has the planning or the city council for plan and the recommendation? This slide here, we want to deviate far from the city council endorsed as a direction to staff. And so that's one of the other areas that influence staff recommendation, where some areas where ARB went higher, we agreed made sense, but in other areas where it was divergent from the council's run, we thought that required more.
And recorded in that chart staff report, I think, so we can see the comparison. Okay, but just looking at this slide that's there, where we're looking at from view and we see 55 or 65, doesn't mean that all that
right
totality is there might be daylight plane impacts on one or another and sets and such. Okay.
And if I'm wrong, but it's adjacent, it's on a property line adjacent to the lower density district. So it's a measured property line of the lower adjacent district.
Okay, I think I understand that. Thank you. I'd like to, oh boy, I think my time. Can I ask one other question then? Okay, I'll hold my last question for the next one. But this one, just wanted to ask, this is fairly brief, but I want to ask about the space. And it's on page 340 of the packet. There's a diagram, and I just had to understand a little more about what I'm seeing there. There's the naturalizer is shown, and there's an observation deck, I believe, and wondering, is there park space under that, or does that go, I mean, is there usable, I'm trying to figure out how much usable park space there is and how close to the creek can get, that sort of thing. So how much of that area around the creek is actually usable as park space? I saw 340, it may be elsewhere.
Believe that it depends on the project will be basic. The naturalization of the creek would require direction on the city council to actually initiate the analysis in close partnership and coordination with the valuer who has easement or creek for their operation maintenance. So it depends on that study actually, what the outcome of that is actually will be. We're considering the 100-foot, according to the analysis that's completed for the NVCAP project. We're proposing the full naturalization, which included 100-foot riparian buffer. So those areas probably will be some recreation vegetation riparian area, and some could be used for past recreation like trails, but it all depends on the.
Sorry, I missed part of your question. So did that answer your question about the? If not,
in
maybe
part,
you can
but what I was trying to get is how much usable green space is there for people?
Usable green space.
Yeah,
About 2
because I'm
acres.
seeing a breadth, and I'm seeing an observation and things, and I'm trying to figure out where you run around and play.
1 acre of housing. Yeah. So as part of the Sobrado development agreement, there was 3 acres that were would be or will be transferred over to the city. 2 acres roughly is dedicated to open space, and 1 acre is roughly dedicated to a future affordable housing project.
Right. Okay.
We're answering your question.
We have a drawing. Tell me about the drawing. What am I seeing on 340?
This is a conceptual illustration for the NVCAP, especially for the ecological concept. So this is showing potential ways to, once it is fully naturalized, we can have the active air multi-use open space, and also consider the observation deck that comes between Portage and Burt, and some act zones and community gardens. Those are like the programs that can be sort of, this is a vision for that particular, yeah.
So is this just a possibility or is this you're actually proposing?
No.
This is-
Yeah, conceptual,
Yeah,
right? It's trying to establish what, there's a whole lot of work that would need to go into, I mean, let's get into the CIP plan. We'd have to have a process for designing park improvements, funding park improvements. There's a whole other piece that's just intended to create an idealized concept of what happened in this area.
Yeah, so my sense was that this was to give us a sense of roughly what a park would look in this area.
At a conceptual level.
So I don't care especially about the elements, because I understand that's premature. I'm just trying to get a sense of, the three acres, two of which are open space and one of which is portable hut. Sounds like a lot. And then I look and it feels like it's been taken up by a fair amount of stuff. That's all. I'm trying to understand from a human perspective if we have we're adding housing, which is great, and we make sure they have a place to play and recreate outside. I'm not trying to get a from this, which is still, it looks like a lot of it. And I understand this is conceptual. So like things like the community gardens are all thoughts. We don't necessarily have to do that. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, you're gonna have, council's gonna have one discretion on how it wants this land that we would, through the development agreement, just for public purpose.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get at. Okay, thank you very much.
I agree with everything that has been around parking issues, and now seeing the new, we understood map does seem like we have our regular parking and supply to those areas. One clarification within the map that you showed, the new map, like there might be part of parcels that are within a half mile and other parts that are outside. Does that mean it would be kind of a portional parking region for a property that kind of straddles both lines?
I don't think that's come up yet, and I don't know if Mr. Yang, if you know that applies. I think it, for the areas covered within the radius, you're exempt, and for the areas outside, I think you're not.
So I don't have that answer readily available.
Okay. It's like the parking issue is like going to have to come back based on this discussion.
So I'd suggest that if the council were interested in requiring parking outside AB 2097, that's direction that you give us tonight as part of your motion that says just use standard parking requirement code. The issue of whether AB 2097 straddles line and how that addresses, that's going to play throughout the city, and we just don't have that answer, but it was the same answer,
right?
Regardless.
Yeah, so I think that would be the direction tonight. Seems like so, and just nice to have that question answered when it does come back, since it does apply to the city.
Yeah, because this ordinance would come back second reading, and we can verify what happens on those edge cases.
Okay. On the issue of height, so divided PTC recommend increasing the height and the SM to 45 feet, but staff still amending, or at least it's still listed as 55 feet, and I believe that's the recommendation, right, in that area, just keep it at 55. If we follow the PTC recommendation, how does that impact the anticipated number of housing units? And can you answer that one specifically, and then a little kind of general changes that are being proposed tonight? How does that impact the 17 sites identified in the housing element? And I think my greatest concern is we're hopefully within a week or two of getting that housing element certified by the state, but I don't think to risk dealing that if we make significant changes.
So I think we need to take a look at, we can pull up a map of those 17 housing element properties, and they might be, and where they fit relative to this conversation height. I will say 5 feet is lower than what we have in there today. And so that would be, and these are areas where housing is allowed. And again, sorry, Mr. Yang, to draw you into this, but I'd want to check you about lowering height on sites that could include housing. And he may have, so we may need to get back on both those points.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. I think that's a critical piece here. We're going to be lowering height and other changes that could reduce the amount of housing units talking about if it's already a housing element.
If I may,
Yes.
so if it's a housing opportunity, essentially how the housing element treats those sites is it's an overlay of development standards. So if there is a housing opportunity site, if the base zoning, which is what is under consideration this evening with implementing that VCAP through the ordinance that's for you, that wouldn't impact what's in the housing element because each individual site in the housing element essentially has sort of overriding development standards that have already been analyzed separately as part of the process. Does that help answer that?
Did you understand?
I thought there was going to be more from
I didn't
staff.
understand. I needed to clarify.
Okay.
I'll give it a try.
All right.
For housing inventory sites, they will not be, basically, their standards will not be impacted by what we do with NVCAPs.
And the reason for that, yeah, that was part of a zoning that you did in January. And that's set. If housing opportunity sites have standards. So even if you, change here, and that wouldn't affect the housing element. Now, I'm saying lowering the height from existing 50 feet to 40 feet on properties zoned to housing, is that a concern for Housing and County Act or related laws?
Yes, existing is 50 feet and the existing is housing. That we not be allowed to do that. If it's existing as a commercially zoned site and we are going to be allowed housing where it wasn't previously allowed, then we could use the height.
So it's like there could be, at least with the 45 feet, we might not be able to do what's in front of us, at least as far as the PTC recognition goes. And I'm sure that's why staff is not amending that.
Yeah, it was also maybe some of those, it was also the recommendation too, be 45 feet. But I guess we've gone through this process and refined it a little bit. We weren't under the impression that we wanted to go lower than the standard allowed today. So for our analysis, the base was, took that input, but the base code was a starting place. And the ARB was wanting to go, 20 plus on top of 35. And that's what we kind of try to balance these things out.
And since I'm out of time, but if when we come back around, second round, appreciate it if could find out as far as housing opportunity sites that are within that area, where they're located, kind of what the height would compare those
your GIS map
compared to 45 feet. So what I'm trying to get at is kind of contextualizing, I think is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a couple 45-foot buildings, but then a sudden one that is taller because it's a housing opportunity site.
Right.
I don't know how that looks, and so I think it would be helpful.
So
there it is.
Yeah, I have that information available to you, and if you look at the left side, the CS zone, and follow. These are all 45. The recommendation from the PC is 45 from there down the line and wraps around the area. So that would be the 45-foot area. So Elko, and then that's Lambert.
And pink colored housing opportunity sites. And that's what that represents.
These are all of them are in opportunity sites.
That are in color.
Yes.
What are, the height of those then, that locked in?
Is it 50 feet? Yeah, 50 feet.
Okay. All of them?
All those.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go a second round. Vice Mayor.
Thanks. Stay with the theme here, just a couple questions. Number one, really, this table is helpful because it shows where everybody was at the beginning, and clearly it was a thought out negotiation analysis. In some cases, the staff actually retights. So it wasn't just, stay all in on squeezing as many housing units in as possible. Appreciate that evidence. And in some cases, PTC went up to 65, which is, new for our city because that's, what we're deciding to do to address our needs. One question that was, I think, brought up by a member of as well, the certain place facing the creek and the probable park, it's 55, I think. Again, everybody was comfortable that because that is, it's going to look too much like a scraper. And in short, is that area by the park. Everybody comfortable with that? I don't know what zone it was. Is that MXM? The MXM?
So it looks like we're within 10 feet of other. 45 feet was the original council preferred plan.
Yeah, as was PTC.
And PT also supported 45 feet. So that was fall council's preferred plan. ARB thought 60 feet and.
Well, this is one where you up from both preferred plan and PC. So.
But down from ARB. Yeah.
Correct.
And not lowering it below code 50 feet in this area today.
Okay. Shifting, there were a couple of public comments in terms of the constraints on building, and was, I guess, if it's not leased for a year, then you can't lease it commercially again. Is that is that correct?
So the ordinance refers non-conforming to the existing chapter in the code related to that type of situation. And what happened is we make a change, like in the code. The code reads as you've got 10 years before this becomes non-conforming.
Okay.
So you need the combination of, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Yang, but you need the combination of 10 years at 1 year of discontinuance before it would be required to abate the use.
Okay. I thought one of the public commenters was that if they didn't lease it a year, they had to change the use, which would be quite different than how we manage it today.
Yeah, if we were to project ourselves out for 20 years, into the future, and then they were continued for a year at a time, yes, the use would be abandoned.
So that's normal.
It's what we have in our code.
That's what I mean. It's normal. I mean, I'm totally familiar with that. I thought this was being more sort of punitive.
Nothing new. It's just recognizing that we have a different vision for the area did in the past.
Yeah, one of the objectives was transitioning away from us very specifically. So
yeah,
and that's my question in this regard. Is do we have with the zoning? Do we have a built-in? Not the exact right words. Built-in office cap because of how we're using it to get more housing here. There's still a concern. I'll put it that way. That we could, some really high offices and we screw up our office housing balance.
So I'm going to ask my staff here to, if I'm wrong about that, you're not a big office building or a big mixed use building because the most amount of office that you can get on any one property is 5,000 square feet.
Right. Okay. Well, I asked that particularly for the benefit of the public so that they understand that, yes, this is mixed use, but this is skyscraper 65 feet with a couple housing units in it.
It'd be the other way around.
Exactly. Okay. Glad we got that.
I do want to verify on the non-conforming use issue. It is either 2 years from the date of it's going into effect or 1 year of discontinuance. So if there was a period of 1 year where a commercial space was not leased, it would change to a conforming use.
And then I think my last question in regard is it was pointed out by PT particularly that there was no economic analysis done on the Newport alternative. Council approved this back in 22. There's some quotes from PTC minutes. No economic analysis was due to budget constraints and was informed by French that council did fund it. I'm not sure what that was, 22 or thereafter. I don't know. And therefore, the other comment in that regard is council made the funding decision. Now they plan coming toward them without component that's required by the ordinance.
I think the PTC was going to make sure that as part of their motion, that the council was aware of their concern that the preferred plan doesn't have the same level of economic analysis that was done for some of the other plans. And so that awareness has been brought before council. And it's not the first time. I want in 2021, the city council had authorized the work for new work to be done for VCAP, and economic studies were put. There was more content funding to the tune of about $300,000 or $350,000. When we came back to the city council to receive the funding for that, that budget appropriation to fund work that the council wants to do, the votes weren't there. And so we had the church to do it, but not the funding to do it. And so that's why we ran into the issue of not being able to do another economic study.
Okay, well, I just want to ask about the procedure and obviously make sure our colleagues are aware of that. Personal comment, when it was done, the prior alternatives was not very effective. That we didn't find that at all useful because of the way that it was done. So spend more money on it to do that, I don't think would be a good investment. Just an opinion. Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Burt.
Thank you. So first, following up on issues around height and density, we're setting the what for this area is significantly increased housing density and heights from what we had before, and even from what was originally proposed, I think, in the NVCAP proposals. We've lifted. What happens when an applicant comes forward under the density bonus law to what we've just adopted or would be adopted?
So they have to enter into the height. So for the density bonus law to be applied, they would create a base project, and that would have to increase that additional density. So the height limit would be applied to depending the affordable housing they provide.
Can you speak a little?
So the additional height would be dependent on the additional affordable housing units the project provides.
So if they came forward with a qualifying project under the density bonus law, 15% of extreme low or 24, whatever percent of low, et cetera, they can seek or be granted by right exception to the height, to the daylight mean. Is that correct? And
a qualifying project that applies for state density bonus would be eligible for a certain number of sessions, and unlimited was related to and I'm not going to get the precise language right because it's specific code, but support that affordable
and the
housing.
boundaries of those waivers are only limited by what they assert is economically necessary for the economics of the project.
Well, so as part of this ordinance, the city is not adopting maximum densities. It's relying on FAR and other development standards to limit density, practical density. And so under the density bonus, what they'll be able to get is effectively a percentage increase of the FAR. And then they'll be able to waive other development standards like height, daylight plane necessary to use that FAR. But it's not a completely unlimited development standard because it's being strained by the FAR and that percentage increase on that.
Yeah, but we're up in the FAR to dense FAR levels 3.0, something we've never had before, and they can waive that. Correct?
So they can't waive FAR. They can get a bonus.
Well, that's what I mean, waive our limit.
Sure, but I guess the way waivers are used elsewhere, the term is used in density bonus means that it's really not limited at all.
So I think everybody needs to understand the implications of this. What we will be adopting here is not necessarily the boundary of what we will be receiving. So when they are seeking an additional amount above limit, waiving boundary is how I was describing. Is there how much above our limit? That's determined by what it takes to make the project economically feasible, or is there some other condition for it?
Based on the amount and the depth of affordability that's provided.
Oh, if they meet the minimum standard, what is that in terms of additional FAR that they'd be allowed?
I believe it's 10 or 15%.
I see.
They are.
Okay, so it's formula.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So one of the things that we set our height and FAR and other design standards or limits here. We have to recognize that those aren't really the limits necessarily, and it creates a real dilemma. If trying to zone an up zone for what we think we want to move it up to, it's actually that plus X. And I don't know how to roll that. But I'm kind of hoping that we have that consideration laid on the table as we were going through these considerations, to not be under the illusion what zoning to is the upper limit of what will happen.
Yeah, so good. And I think we have some in the staff report about state density bonus law relative to that. You're right. I mean, this area where this has recently become more aggressive on state density law. And another reason that frankly factored into why we weren't supporting the ARB recommendation to 65 feet in some areas as well.
Okay.
And another footnote to this, council did give direction to look at expanding the El Camino Real focus area. And within the next months, we're going to be back before the council, possibly with an amendment to the NVCAP to consider additional development standards. Those would be alternatives to a density bonus law fixed with 20% inclusionary, similar to what we have done across the street. So I just want to put that on council's radar too. I think that's forthcoming.
Okay, just want to make sure we're conscious of the implication of that. Thanks.
Councilman Lithcott-Hames.
Thank you, Mayor. The conversation between Member Burt, Director Lake kind of teed up, I had one to raise, which is the relationship between the Alka focus area and the NVCAP has obviously been many years making, as those involved know best. El Camino area relatively new comparatively, but right across the street. And so I'm wondering, I was going to ask to what extent is one informing the other, and the arrival of the focus area right across the street at 80 feet, I think it is. What does that do? Analysis that's appropriate from an architectural board standpoint, from a PTC standpoint. And I think what you said is we are probably going to come back with an amendment to NVCAP with a new plan for giving an alternative to state density bonus. But I'm out of my depth right now. You tell me it again.
Exactly right. I wouldn't call it a plan because it's a plan. Could maybe call it an amendment plan to consider adding, identifying certain properties with NVCAP that would be appropriate to receive the standard or similar standard to what was done across the street. This is the analysis that staff are working on. I will note that, when the El Camino focus area, that 20% inclusionary requirement was ownership or apartments. And my read of the ARB's conversation about the NVCAP relative to housing focus area, we've got buildings up to 85 feet across the street. Those buildings have 20 inclusionary, and an apartment building in NVCAP could pay an in fee. So there may be a policy reason why we might want to go so high right now until we finish that El Camino Real analysis to see if we can get more affordable units inclusionary on a development in a rental project in the future rather than right now. So getting it at a level that the council's comfortable with, the set of base standards plus density bonus is what we were looking to strike.
And to be density bonus, if sought and utilized, they have to build that number of affordable units. They can't do in lieu. Is that?
It would have to be site on the percentage, and as Maria said, the level of affordability and the percentage factor into how much extra bonus they get.
So we do this again. Another conversation of this neck of the woods. I would love to see a projection of, if the density bonus hypothetically was applied in some areas, how many more units of the affordable housing do we predict and get as we struggle to make sure that we can get enough of it built at certain levels, and how expensive it is to build extremely affordable housing? It might be helpful to know, yes, there's a cost, people might be able to go higher, but if we're also, at some point, it's a benefit to have these affordable units. So I would just see that comparison at some point, that sort of hypothesizing.
We could certainly do that for the El Camino Real extension.
Thank you.
Councilman.
I wanted to ask about so it has to do density bonus also with regard to affordable units. So in the NCAP area is 50%, right, inclusionary, and then the El Camino focus area is 20% inclusionary.
So remember, just a clarification, it's the same rules apply in NVCAP as apply elsewhere with respect to inclusionary housing.
Say that again.
So we're not doing any different standards in NVCAP for inclusionary housing than elsewhere.
So they're all 20%?
So the works is, if it's an apartment building, then that development is eligible for payment into in lieu fee. If it's ownership units, condominiums, townhomes, that's an inclusionary requirement of 15%. And that 15% has, I forget the exact percentages here, but 2/3 of it is either at 100% AMI and 1/3 of it at 120 per AMI. What the percentages are, I may have gotten that, but the point is it's at 100% or higher for the inclusionary requirement for condominiums. The El Camino Real area is 20% inclusionary at 80% AMI. NVCAP follows the same process for the city. Pay the fee for your ownership, 15% inclusionary.
The MV cap area?
Yes.
Okay. Why did we not pay in lieu of the rentals?
Why do we do the?
Right, why did we do that? Don't we want the affordable housing for rental as well?
It's the economics behind rental prototypes is a condominium development where you can sell it and benefit from the sale and help pay your investment, where the rental has a longer horizon for receiving your return on that investment. So it's not economically feasible to put the engineering units, the development standards that we historically have had in the city. We changed that formula across the street, right? So for housing focus area, we want 2% inclusionary regardless of ownership or rental. But look what we have in exchange for that. We went up to 8 feet in height and 4.0 FAR, and we made concessions on parking. So all of those things then made it economically viable to provide the 20% inclusionary for apartments.
Okay. And so if, so how, does it apply? So for example, the teacher house that's coming up at 100% affordable, one down the street near the motel. So would that be 120% AMI, and is in any of our areas that we're focused on? Is that part of a Camino focus area?
So not presently. I mean, it's part of the El Camino South focus area. It's across the street, and it will be a site that we'll look at as part of the council's direction to study and extend that program. It is also a site that's located within the NVCAP project boundaries. The applicant to date has sought to avail himself of the planned home zoning or planned community zone application process. And that, by definition from the council, needs to include 20% inclusionary. That's averaged out to 80% AMI. And the applicant has done that and has, for the 80% balance of units on that project is, and I forget the exact word, but is coming in at around 120% AMI. I mean, not precisely right, but that's what that applicant is saying at, teacher housing or affordable housing. The staff is looking at as a PZ application with 20% meeting the requirement that the city council had set forth. And the balance of that is also affordable at roughly 120% AMI.
Okay. And did I hear also talk about waiving the development impact fees for projects that are coming at 100% affordable?
I missed the first part.
Am I hearing that there requests for waiving the development impact fee if the project 100% affordable?
So I don't want to get into a project that's not before you, Raul. If you're talking about the affordable, that teaching one, but I will tell you that.
Also talking about if you're considering at a later time applying this across the city, then I think that we do need to talk about development fees. Is the plan to implement citywide under the HIP program?
So we're talking about a lot of different topics right now. So we've now moved to the housing incentive program, which is another initiative that we're working on. And also is an alternative to state city bonus law. The idea there is to spur additional housing production. The existing housing incentive HIP program, it has not materialized the type of units that we were anticipating, and we need to make changes if we want to continue on that policy path. We are not looking at making adjustments to the development impact fees as a result of the HIP. However, as part of the housing element, we have committed looking at our development impact fees to see if our limiting the ability for us to produce housing.
So I just want to make sure that before we move into looking at whether we should be considering waiving our development impact for any program, we should be doing a study to see how it impacts the city's funds. If anything, I think that use that also as an incentive. If they're going to produce more of the deep affordable, then there should be deeper discounts for in terms of waive the development impact fee. But if they're at 20% AMI, even though it's defined now and within our as affordable, it's still a market rate. So I would to analyze that, or it is I'd like to see what the fees are going to do and how it impacts city funding for
Okay, and-
infrastructure and everything else.
So, and that project's not before you now. And with respect to the NCAP, there is no reduction of development impact fees that being proposed as part of the NV project that's before you.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Vig.
Thank you. And, we kind of dove into the weeds, but I do want to say that, I appreciate the 7 years that went ahead tonight, and grateful to see this transit-oriented, mixed income, multimodal, sustained green neighborhood is closer to mission. So I do thank you, and also welcome Ms. Shaw and Mr. Fredo. Thank you. Just picking up briefly on that, there is in the BCAP, the actual plan that's appended to our staff report at packet 345 is what's the page on heights and massing. And it's about some of these standards, and it talks about the affordable housing height bonus. And so just to tie together, me, please. One, I'm trying to remember with the Sobrato deal and the 1 acre and all of that, was it to be 100% affordable?
So yes, that is land that was dedicated to the city with the intent
With that
to
intent.
100% affordable.
Okay, good. So that's what I thought I remembered, because sort of on the same theme, there's a item 0.1.2 is affordable housing bonus, and describes what you were just referencing, Director Late, talks about through this housing incentive program or the state density bonus, 100% below market rate projects shall be eligible for additional bonus height up to 33 feet. So does that mean, well, where would that
Well, what I'll tell you is that is law.
Yes.
And so you want to know 30.
I just want to know I know
Yeah.
I change it.
So 30 feet, up to 33 feet on top of the height limit that you have.
What are we positing for the affordable housing piece, the 100%? The thing we were just talking about in the Sobrato space, do we have opposed? I mean, I know it's not.
Okay, so this is complete. Are you referring to specifically at 1 acre site?
Yeah.
That's completely within the city control. Okay, because this isn't going to be, you're going to own the land and going to engage presumably a nonprofit home builder, and we will set forth parameters of we want that building to be built.
That's great, and that's not affected by
No,
any of this stuff.
right.
That's trying to get it.
Yeah,
So
no,
the
that-
height limits on here, we need to add 30 for that, because that's elsewhere or outside the scope of ordinance and things we're doing tonight.
Yeah, just because it says one thing here doesn't mean that when the council is contemplating future affordable housing project on that one site, you decide you want it at 50 and you want it to be all bedrooms and restricted at 60% MI. And we would begin a conversation with a home builder, nonprofit builder, how do we achieve that?
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to lay that out, because that is referenced here in the report. And I would miss if I didn't ask about what's referenced in the DAF report, where it talks about the finding of significant unavoidable impact related to air quality, necessitating council agreement of a statement of abiding conditions. And so I'm just hoping you can help me understand a little bit about what we've done, because it also talks about build out of the NVCAP on a plan level with a significant and avoidable criteria air pollutant emissions impact. And it's been learning more and more about PM 2.5, PM 10, and the serious health impacts. And there can be a bit of we definitely want to increase housing. Housing requires construction, has dust, particulate matter, et cetera. But so I don't want to derail and be up with this, but I think it's a real concern that we don't talk a lot about here. We talk about, climate and other issues. It's real and it's serious. I think we're beginning to understand the deeper impact of that. So see that there's the attachment, you have the proposed resolution to certify the SR, and there are various sections in it, and I don't know, one's labeled significant impacts reduced to less than significant, but one where it talks about air quality is unheading significant and unavoidable impacts and talks about mitigation measures. And I'm wondering if you could just, if there's somebody, I don't know if there's someone online, one of you can explain a bit more about this. And so I'm at page 216, and the mitigation measures are all talking about the MRP, right? But that's already been adopted and will be implemented. And I couldn't find a direct link to the EIR, but there's this whole set of things that we're going to do. And a lot of them are, well, let me just stop there and I'll back to it. But can you just explain to me how this works? How additional mitigation, how incremental to what we're already doing?
Well, I'll take a first cut at it, and we can go more deeply into it. So the first thing to know is that as part of the 2017 comprehensive plan process and environmental impact report that's prepared, that too had significant unavoidable impacts and these mitigation measures for air quality. And what we're doing here is lifting those standards and applying to this supplemental EIR. These are standards, these are mitigations that the city has and have implemented relative to development that is required, and we're restating here in this document. So when we do project reviews and we're looking at projects for VMT, reduction as required by the plan and as required by the NVCAP process, reductions of like 30% or greater in some instances is the way to help reduce those particulate emission. That's how we get the mitigation, reduce the number of VMT traveled, right? Vehicle miles. Okay, so now I'll pause there and see if that gets, did that do anything to help answer your question?
That's great. It's actually helping.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can keep.
So I'm now reaching the limit.
Okay.
So let me ask, do we have a consultant who wants to expand on this?
We have Natalie Noe. I'm going to have her actually join us and explain further.
We're going to bring a consultant on.
City Council, my name is Natalie Noe with David Powers, and I assisted the city with preparing the EIR or the supplemental EIR for the VCAP. And the supplemental EIR rely on BACMED's level thresholds to evaluate impacts related criteria air pollutant emissions. And there are two criteria that BACMED set when looking at criteria pollutant emission plan level. And that's whether the plan is inconsistent with the control measure in the 2017 app, or whether the plan would increase VMT rate would exceed the rate population increase. And for the supplemental EIR, found that the VCAP would increase VMT and daily trips the rate higher than the population increase. So that would have a significant criteria pollutant emission impact. And as previously noted, we tiered off the comprehensive plan EIR and included mitigation measures that were identified in the comprehensive plan EIR. This would include future project level developments from being insignificant from criteria pollutant emissions by applying BACMED's standard best management practices. So this is just plan level impact. And the mitigation in the comprehensive plan EIR would reduce these impacts, but wouldn't reduce it to less than significant. And that's consistent comprehensive plan EIR. Yeah.
And I also noted, so we'll look at what the things that are in our the certification, the proposed resolution to certify. There's quite a few things that talk about, future development projects, or we're going to bring things in. It's just kind of confusing. I understand that we had the MLP and the comp plan, we're applying it to this, but it talks about we shall update, we shall do this, we shall send an HRA. So I'm just trying to put it together, what has been done and what will be done. Because it's not clear to me it's not clear to me what new and additional, and it's just been there before, and I guess we're just moving it to these as well. Looking at the actual language. So they're talking about, the proposed plan will include policies to mitigate potential sources of air contaminants through rating, or the means to reduce human risks and meet the Bay Air Quality Management applicable threshold of significance. There's, I mean to take us so deep, it's unclear to me how this fits together. I'm sure it's clear to some. I'm just trying to get it.
So language is not new. It's the same that applied in 2017. It's being restated in the document. And when a project is reviewed, air quality items, the Cultural Resources Act is new and specific to NVCAP. When the project is sent to the planning department for review as an entitlement process, it goes through that review and its conditions that require compliance with these types of standards. And we engage the Early Management District in that process to verify compliance. Or we have our staff who engage with them. But the standards, if you reduce your EMT to a certain threshold, that's mitigation that we're trying to achieve. So most applicants reduce their vehicles traveled as a default way of meeting that threshold.
All right, well, I don't want to take too much more time, but it's just confusing. There's all kinds of things out, other types of project, other activities. So the city shall update its CEQA procedure, require that future residential project, anyway, I'll take this line, but it's a lot of things here that we're going to agree, change and do. I'm trying to understand all of those things that the MMR already says we do. They're not additional, because they're recited if they're additional. That's confusing to me.
Understood. They are cited as if they're additional, and this part of our everyday practice reviewing projects, we do this now. But I see what you're saying. It's written if we're going.
It's written as if a whole slew of brand things that we're going to do a lot of stuff, but
and there may be some components to this that have to memorialize into procedures to have it written and posted. But part of our review process, we're looking for compliance with the plan mitigation measures for development, and in NVCAP we'll be doing anything here, and it's just going to duplicate what we've seen with the comp plan.
Okay, well, I'm going to trust this has been set out by others, and I'll go educate myself before we against it again. The reason I was mentioning it is it seems that a lot of it could be viewed as kicking the can down the road, because it talks about, well, in future with this, and it's as if we can't do now, so we're going to go do all stuff later. And and I'm trying to figure out all fits together, but I will take that offline and for your hints and help.
We are near 11 o'clock, so let's see if we get to a motion. I'm sure we'll have a bit of discussion on a motion as well. Councilman Coop, action?
No, I don't have further questions.
Can you hold up questions until we have a perfect, unless there is motion? Remember.
Well, first of all, I'm a supporter of the plan really having significant housing increases, but there is a concern I have about fairness on the non-conforming uses. So we have from two speakers tonight that their concerns that at vacancies for here, they would lose their ability to continue existing office use, or if they had fire or whatever. Is that the case?
Yeah, as Mr. Yang clarified, if the use is discontinued 1 year, it would be subject to the provisions of code that would require it to be converted to a conforming use.
We've seen at different times that in a normal time, a year vacancy in a major office being and extend for more than a year if they have to bring big tenant. It's the thing if you got smaller tenants. In this current climate, it's even more the case. I'm concerned that that's just fair to them. No, I'm not a big advocate of the office uses, certainly expanding them.
Yeah, and to address that, council could consider making adjustments to that policy. We would something, to the effect that notwithstanding the non-conforming section of the code, office or is that it became non-conforming, with the adoption of the NVCAP. Shall have a number of years, before it's considered non-conforming or something.
Okay. And then I want to lastly talk about the SACs, particularly on Park. Park's a bike boulevard. In this area, doesn't function as a boulevard. It functions bike lanes. And right now, it's a bit narrow for the bike lanes. We have, is it 5 to 10 setbacks on Park there?
Setback right now is 5 on Park Boulevard.
In the existing setback or in the end?
The plan proposes 5 foot.
And so I'm surprised we've gone this far in this many years in this process, and we've got a foot setback where we have inadequate bike lanes. No, I heard that we we haven't gone forward with valuation that would, and with the property owners, we're upzoning these properties. Why couldn't we, as part of that upzoning, increase the setback modest?
Thank you, Councilmember. No, that's a policy direction that the council could give staff to increase the step on.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. I think that covers it for me. I don't know who wants to try a motion. That's going to be Corey.
Okay. You ready for a motion? Okay. So, Vice Mayor.
I mean, we'll need some help fairly a mess, but I'd like to move the staff proposal with a lot of thanks back to all the workings. I think someone said they brought up alternative M that wasn't considered, but it was influential on the 22 decision by count and everybody else. So to move that, but I would like to amend the proposal with respect to parking in a way that fits the legal advice we got. The preference is to remain with our parking codes right now and then deal with 2097 as needed.
So while the council deliberating on this, Mr. has shared with an opinion or a letter of technical assistance guide from HCD about how AB 2090 applies. And this letter would seem to suggest, and Mr. correct me if I'm wrong, or amplify this as appropriate, that it's measured from the site boundaries, which would be consistent with the first map that we showed, applying generally to almost the totality of PACC. Mr. Yang, did I have that correct?
Right, that's the HCDs on 2097.
I'm sorry, site bound issues?
So it's HCD has advised that the 1/2 miles measured from the parcel of the location.
Parcel bound.
Yeah.
But why is a parcel? Just because there's an area plan?
It's the Caltrans parcel, which has the station lots associated with that. So, but that doesn't. So, and just provide the map illustration again. So, and let me just apologize. It's a moving target for us, as you can see, and implementing things like this is challenging. So this is what we're struggling with. I don't think it takes from the council's interest to not wanting to extend parking reductions beyond the boundary, whatever that may be established by the state. But you can see in the diagram here the variance that the difference that we're looking at. And I don't know if I don't know. And Mr. Yang, maybe you can help. I mean, with the guide letter from technical guidance letter from HCD, is that the final decision on that? This
ultimate decision would become court, but the court probably weigh HCD's guidance as part of its considerations.
Yeah, so on that point, I'm not a land use attorney, and I also do Mr. Levinsky's research. But I don't understand why we wouldn't keep the status quo unless we're addressed by the state, and we can help set precedent on this issue for the state. If the language can that we keep parking constraints as in place in the NVCAP, yeah, that's what I think would be what I hope the consensus of the council.
And how I'm understanding the clerk is that the city's parking standards would apply to properties in the NVCAP outside of the AB 2090 boundary.
Outside of it?
Right.
Why wouldn't we just push it inside as well?
Oh,
well, at least the city turned some humor out of that question I just said.
Right. State's preemptive on this too. So Albert discussing a potential ambiguity for what the state law means, but we bring at those two maps and you're adjusting.
Some of the research that Mr. Levinsky did sounded like it didn't have to do much right now. And I'm saying I'm do that research, and I'm not land use attorney, so I'm just trying to give us as much flexibility as possible because we need parking there.
Right. Mr. Yang, can you speak to that aspect of Mr. Levinsky comments?
Sure. So I recall there's a suggestion the city could study that eliminating parking would, have a negative impact on the neighborhood. And it's true there is some provision for a parking study, but the bar is high to show that there's a substantially negative impact on the park conditions, and that has to be supported by preponderance of the evidence, which basically means the court's not to give us any deference at all when reviewing our finding about that substantially negative impact. And so it's just a very high bar to meet, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I don't want to get into arguments, but 500 or 600 homes with 3 people in them could be 500 more cars. So that's a projection for the area.
Mr. Yang,
whatever we can maximize our flexibility is what I'm trying to get to.
Right. So, right. It might be a way forward to give staff direction to proceed to the extent by law. But I'm wondering whether the planning director or Mr. Yang is aware of any city that's used things like this to opt out of AB 297 based on future concerns about loss of parking.
So I can't speak to that. I guess I would say that we would need to complete that study before we try to impose a parking requirement, right? So we couldn't just write our ordinance to require parking within half a mile of transit center. We would need to have a study to support that before we did that standard.
I ask how about ADA? EA as well as E?
That's what I meant to include, was that
Okay.
kind of ability as well.
Surely I can't imagine state law is gonna be that segregated.
All right. So, Mr. Yang, Councilmember Coop, asking about the EV chart portion of Mr. Levin's comments as well. And you can assist with that.
Yeah, so AB 2097, I'd say is ambiguous on this point of whether a city can require EV and EA spaces when no other parking is provided. There's a split among cities. I'd say the majority of cities probably take the approach that staff in Palo Alto have taken, which is that we see 2097 as allowing us to require EV and ADA spaces when parking is provided. We require the percentage of parking that's voluntarily provided to be ADA and E spaces. But it's, I guess it's just the kind of policy discussion that I think Director Late was referencing, that we were going to bring forward whether the city wanted to be more aggressive on that front.
I'd like to be more so, but Councilman Burt has a follow-up.
On 2 aspects. First, on that last one, what we've received staff is kind of a conclusion that we should do what other cities done, and we've heard what appears to be the quotation of the legislative language as well as a record on the legislative intent. And that doesn't seem in line with what staff has said, except the staff has said, oh, other cities done this nearby. They've eliminated e-charging and ADA charging, which EV charging, it does to, gee, if we don't have any EV charging, how does that even impact the air quality aspects of the ER that we were just talking about? This doesn't make good sense. And anyway, if it's clear in the state law and the language, then I'd like to see that. We haven't seen that. And what we've had is testimony tonight that appeared to quote from the record in a way seemed to contradict the recommendation that we've had. And second, I want to go into this boundary issue. When Yang came forward a few minutes ago and in real time this evening found an HCD letter that presumably has been there for months, and I don't know why that hadn't been part of the preparation for this meeting. I thought you were saying, Mr. Late, the parcel was the parcel in the plan area was the boundary. But are you saying, or is Mr. Yang saying that parcel is the Caltrain lot parcel?
Yeah, it's a half mile from the transit lot.
Well, what's What language?
So we can pull up that language for you.
That seems nuts, because, we can have a long, narrow parking
Yes,
lot
we do.
that is not the train loading area.
Why we did the point.
And so we've got three different things. We had the original map, then we had the map tonight, then we had the real-time fly vision on the map.
Right. So
And we're expected to go to an approval of this project tonight based upon things that are on right and left. And this is frustrating now.
as you noted, it's an instrument. It's poorly written and doesn't give any context to the whole situation. And this is one of many state laws that have been thrust on cities that we're trying to navigate and respond to.
Well, if there's an 80 guidance letter, it were before tonight.
Fair. And
as well as I have an explanation, we haven't, of why we had two different circles drawn, one from months ago and one tonight. All we heard was that it's been re-looked at it again and it's a smaller circle. We didn't hear why that changed. So this is three. I don't want to.
Okay.
That's all I want to say. We've had three different explanations. They're all with different impacts. And how are we supposed to make a right decision and trust the latest revision is in fact the correct one? This is just too much of a moving bit.
Okay. I understand all that. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand it. And I'll just, it actually doesn't change the equation, because state law is state law, and that's what we have to abide by.
But we don't know what law really is.
I understand, but what I can say is the local standard parking applies outside of the AB 2019 boundary.
All right.
Because that,
you've said where I was headed.
I think I recommended that book too.
Pardon me?
That was what I had recommended as a policy solution if they wanted to apply standards beyond 2097. So I recognize that there's a lot of information. What we can to give you the information to make sure.
So I think that is on the screen right from the clerk, which was the first point.
Because when the vice chair was asking on what he could do, I was waiting to hear that recommendation.
I gave that guidance that the city could require the local parking requirement beyond AB 2090 boundary, wherever that is.
But as motion, further instigation of that state law can be under. So that's the first point. And then the second point that was a question that I had, Councilmember also raised it, is if we want to do something greater than 1 year in the case of a non-conforming use. And I'm open to that, given those constraints. So put the amendment as that should go to 2 years. And that's the sense of my motion, needing us. Second point on non-conforming use, I think, has to be extended to 2 years. Looking for staff to help me here. In the case of vacancy or destruction of the building, would that cover most of the options?
So the question is whether there's other scenarios aside from destruction of the building
and a vacancy.
Or a vacancy. I think we can look into that more. Not that I'm aware of off the top of my head.
Yeah, me either.
Perhaps if council's interest is to make this general rather than identify specific scenarios, just call it a discontinuity in use of the building or something along those lines.
This may be comprehensive enough, but detailed enough as is.
Staff is working on some language that might address any questions here. Vice Mayor, do you want to include anything related to EV and ADA spaces?
Yes, that was my intent.
I'm sorry?
That was my full intent, because we don't presume that has been ruled by the ambiguity, as the attorney said, in 2097. Thanks for pointing that in case it was Mickey.
So if we could give some minute, and let them work on language that may address the points that have been raised. Looks like we've got.
My only question just is that if you understand the intent is that we want to include that. I mean, that's the answer you want back after your analysis that we do ADA and EV.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be part of the plan we're adopting tonight if this motion passes, but we're giving us direction to look at requiring EV and ADA parking spaces, even if we can't require standard parking spaces as part of development. One clarifying question is to NVCAP or citywide?
NVCAP.
Okay. I do want to have that conversation citywide too, and we're going to talk that in September a little bit. Maybe we can do a little bit of work between now and then to amplify this perspective for NVCAP.
But rolling back to the last part of last answer, said this wouldn't be part we're adopting. So what we're to adopt is to be able to do what we want to do in the with the parking.
So letter B does not implement that. We would have to change that language if you wanted to require EV and ADA park spaces part of your action tonight. Is that the intent?
I understand that you need research beyond just walking out of here. Well, that's if you understood, we want to be able to use both of those. So if you used to put both of those in and you come back to us and say we can't do them or how we have to amend it, another way to work it.
Okay, so then I would modify C, and Albert, if you're on, you can check this, but I would start C, clerk, to say the extent allowed by state law, require the provision for EV ADA parking space in the North Ventura coordinated in the NV.
Yeah, shift, good.
And then, yeah, delete everything before requiring, or yeah, including requiring. To the extent required by law, require like EV and ADA parking spaces within the project bounds. And so, yep, yes, and then everything after that. And then if you can replace just before parking project, right boundaries. And you can delete parking. Thank you.
Okay, got the final motion. Do we have a second? Okay, I will second. Would you like to speak motion?
Yeah. As I noted, I have a lot of history with this project, and I've seen it evolve positively. It's perfect, but we're getting a lot of what we want in housing. We got the direction of transition and great on all parts. I'm definitely sensitive to the item that Councilmember mentioned, is that there is a city bonus, but that's one of those state laws. The only way to do that is to whack things down by 30% to prevent that, and I don't think that's the direction to go.
Yeah, I'm open to amendments to this. I do think everybody's been involved for a very long time on this. My concern is that there have been a lot of housing opportunity sites here. This is a piece of our housing element, and yeah, I'm kind of concerned as well that removing a lot of city and for height would jeopardize our element at this point. Okay. Councilmember, thank you for your patience. I'll turn.
Thank you. I just had a question. So are there mitigating for Per Olive, Fernando, and Lambert for cut through traffic?
We don't have any changes to you mean the vehicle travel direction. So the only changes that we're proposing as part of the NV app that changes the direction of the travel is the Ash Street between Expressway or Page Mill Road and Olive Avenue. So let me share a screen with you that's showing the location.
Is that the crossing over?
So the vehicular, now it is a day street. So we're proposing a one-way street that there's no cut through traffic into the end cap area. So that is one change that we're proposing as part of the NVCAP, but all the other streets will keep the two-way street.
But Ash is parallel to Park, correct?
No, Ash is parallel to Park, but it's only,
it stops at Olive.
It's between Olive and Page Mill. It's changing, yeah.
So it's going to be a way?
It's going to be one way.
Okay, and then is there any mitigation from El Camino to Park on Olive, Per, Fernando, Lambert?
What do you mean by, I'm sorry, could you explain?
Because it goes right through the neighborhood, so would people be able to take Camino, go down Pepper, Olive, and then go on to Park and out another way, or through Lambert or through Pepper?
Yeah, right now Pepper.
The whole thing is just that there's cut-through traffic at those places.
So cut-through traffic that was mitigated, fortunately, is the only street.
Is on Ash Street.
Between Page Mill and Olive.
So it's a one-way coming from Orange Expressway? Coming into, going out.
Going out.
Have any of the within Ventura, has there been any study or ounce of how traffic mitigation into inside streets in Ventura? So like between Matadero, Margarita.
That's outside of the NVCAP boundary. So we have some sort of intersection that we have studied as part of the traffic study, but I have to actually check whether that actually included. It may not.
Okay, because there's going to be an effect in the neighborhood as well, for sure, with parking as well as with cut traffic.
Just as for information, Pepper is a cut-through track to Park. So Pepper will have the same, there's no change to the direction of the traffic.
Right.
It wouldn't have an impact as the.
I'm thinking that we're so focused on just the MV boundary area, we're not looking at the rest of the neighborhood. So there are going to be impacts, the rest of the neighborhood cut through traffic, so forth. So anyways, I hope that's something that you could also take a look at going through that. I will say that the supplemental environmental impact report, I am not satisfied with it. There's the air quality impacts and there's all these reports that are supposed to come forward. So I find it very hard to certify it. Furthermore, in terms of transportation, there is again the mention of TDMs, which again does not. I haven't seen a TDM that has been worthy on paper that it has been printed on. And the last TM that I know we're still working on, which is Astaleas, it's 1 year into it, and I believe it's coming to us at our next meeting or on 19. But again, it didn't really take into consideration a lot of the impacts in there. I don't have any confidence in the mitigating monitoring and reporting program. So I really appreciate the work everybody did in this. But it's a huge impact into a neighborhood without giving it full consideration, except to come with MMPs and overriding considerations that I don't see overriding of these significant impacts. Thank you.
Lambert.
Yeah, I want to offer an amendment on the setback on work, but I first want to staff, we're currently 5 feet. I'd be interested in something in the vicinity of 15. Is that a distance that would still require a reopening of this?
Yes, we can definitely consider it, but just to clarify, the 5-foot setback applies to north of Park Boulevard, and there's a 10-foot setback south of Park Boulevard. Let me just share the
South of Park.
south
yeah.
side of, yeah.
Yeah. We might think of it as, but I'm sure
yes,
it's
sorry.
actually south. No, that the compass is off from our common concern. Okay, so
Can I just add?
Yeah.
So on the side of Park Boulevard, there the DA for the Sobrados would not affect that, just to be clear on that.
Could you say that? I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, so and I don't know, I don't recall what the setbacks were for the townhome or other development associated with the development as we sit today. But if there a setback that were imposed upon Park and that development encroached into that SEC, the development would rule that setback because it's a development agreement.
If a development that's already received,
yes,
you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So I'd like to propose a 15-foot setback on both sides, subject to any grandfathering of either approved or existing development. Is that what we need to say? What?
Also, the development agreement that the entered into, it does commit the city to or the rules.
Right. So any development agreements, tell me to circumscribe this.
I'll defer to the city attorney, but I just say what I want, which is a 15 setback from Park Boulevard on either side of the street. And then we can handle the A issue.
Very good.
Doesn't matter.
Is that acceptable?
It is.
With me?
Thank you.
Okay, other discussion? Going once, twice. All right, no further lights, we take the vote.
Councilmember
Yes.
Mayor Stone?
Yes.
Councilmember Ku? No. Councilor Hames?
Yes.
Councilor Tanaka?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lowing?
Yes.
Member Vinker?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1.
Thank you. All right, we've got one more item 10, 1122, but I believe it's a timely and one that we should be able to take care of quickly. So I think everybody's okay with continuing forward. Okay, let's be quick. So item 10, designation of voting delegate and alternate for the California City Annual 2024 Conference. Don't believe there's any staff presentation on this item. Nope. Any public comment?
No to speak and no hands raised.
Okay, then we will return to the dais. Councilmember Ku.
May I make a motion?
please go ahead.
I'd like to nominate Councilmember Bunker to designate to voting delegate and myself the alternate.
Second.
I think Lithcott Hames at the second. Would you like to speak to your motion?
No, thank you.
Okay. Would you like to speak to your again?
No, thank you.
Anyone like to speak to it? Go ahead, Councilmember Baker.
I just want to say thank you. I was to nominate you.
Let's not do that.
All right. Seeing no further lights, let's take.
Councilmember Lehane?
Sorry, you hold off on the vote. Is Councilmember Ku, isn't it? Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Councilmember Vinker?
Yes.
Member Tanaka?
Yes.
Councilmember Burt?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Alling?
Yes.
Mayor Stone?
Yes.
Councilmember Ku?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. With that, we are adjourned. Have a good night.